Members, can we start taking our seats, please? We're a minute away. Right, let's get cracking. Good afternoon, everybody. First time in my memory we're meeting in the afternoon, but there are sound and genuine reasons for that. At 6 o'clock in Committee Room B, there is a Maidstone Borough Council briefing session. At 7:15 in this room there is another meeting of Maidstone Borough Council. So that's really why it's 3 o'clock. We'll be finished all by 4, I'm sure. And if you believe that, you'll believe anything. But it would be nice to finish sometime between 6 and 6:30, but we will see how life goes. Before we start the agenda, I have to take this opportunity, as is norm, to advise all of us, members and visitors, that if the fire alarm does sound, please remain seated to enable Mr. Bailey, this is Mr. Bailey, to assess the situation and give further instructions on the evacuation of the building if necessary. Today's proceedings, as always, will be webcast by the Council, but if anyone else is intending recording these proceedings, can you please let me know now? This question is asked not to stop you, but merely to ensure that members and other members of the public in the room know that this is taking place. Right, so we have a very full agenda. I'm indebted, as is the Vice Chairman, for so many members putting forward items for this agenda, and they've all been included. Agenda item 1. Mr. Clark. Any apologies?
No apologies.
Agenda item 2, therefore no substitute members. Visiting members wishing to speak. There are none. Disclosures by members and officers. There are none. Disclosures of lobbying. There are none. Oh, there is. That's me.
Is that right? Yes, on by the Cycle Forum, which I'm a member, on item to do with the towpath scheme, Colin, is item 13. And I'm also a member of the Cycle Forum, so if appropriate, I won't speak on that item. We'll leave it to me.
Thank you for your kindness just now reading out one particular question to a member of the public who is with us today.
Yeah, I've got more questions for that.
Fine. Okay. Right, let's crack on. Agenda item 6, to consider whether any item should be taken in private because of the possible disclosure of exempt information. You will all see there are no Part 2 items on the agenda. So all items will be taken in public as proposed. Agenda item 7 on your agenda, pages 1 to 5, the minutes of our meeting on the 19th of October. Are the minutes agreed and correct? Are there any amendments, alterations, additions? All agreed? Thank you, members. Oh, sorry, Mr. Bird.
Yeah. Chairman, are you going to do matters arising from the minutes?
But Mr. Bird...
Well, I would like to report on something which I think may be relevant to some of our discussions later. It relates to item 21 of the minutes, your ongoing discussions with the Maidstone Police about parking and obstruction, and I'm aware that one or two members have a few issues with this. A lady of your acquaintance, I believe Councillor Dean and you know each other fairly well, and I met with the Police and Crime Commissioner a few weeks ago and raised this point with him and showed him a few photographs of such parking problems. And we got the following response, which I'm afraid I don't regard very helpful, but I think it is relevant to our discussions. A member of my office has met with the Maidstone District Commander. They used the photos you provided to highlight the situation and concerns that you expressed. As you know, the situation is complicated by the law, which clearly differentiates between what is a policing matter and what is a local authority matter. Although both your photos show potential infringements of the law, neither of them are actually ones that the police have a power to act upon. Now, I am still trying to understand how the police cannot act on infringements of the law. But if anybody can clarify that, I would be very grateful. Thank you.
Well, that doesn't say very much more than the letter we got in reply earlier, does it? I think perhaps you and I, when we're next at another major building, let's have a parley with Mrs. Dean and see what steps we can take to get somebody senior from headquarters to really look into this. But thank you for letting us know. At least that's been followed up in part, but not with any great success. Agenda item 8, presentation of petitions. We have two petitions this afternoon. One from Councillor Daly concerning traffic problems Queen's Avenue. That's followed by Mr. Wiles' petition about the number 19 bus service. Each petitioner will have 5 minutes to present their petition to the committee. Following the presentation of each petition, the committee may not debate the petition, but the chairman can make one of 3 choices. Depending how good the petition is, Mr. Daly, I'll make one of those 3 choices. But knowing you, it will be immaculate and we'll make a choice. So, Mr. Daly, do you want to move or not move?
At your instruction, Chairman. Shall I? Thank you. Chairman, I've got some maps prepared, I hope, for circulation, and I think they're probably coming round as we speak. Chairman, I do hope my time isn't starting until they are actually distributed, but in the meantime, I will try and just outline where we're coming from. Thank you very much.
Right.
Thank you, Chairman. The map actually just indicates where Queen's Avenue is, and it shows that it's a very short, about 650 metre length connection between London Road and Queen's Road itself. But off it there are several roads and closes. Most of these, 4 of them, come onto Queen's Avenue, and the other 3 link in behind that, so that they've got a total of 7 roads of traffic all coming out onto Queen's Avenue, which itself is only about 7 metres wide. It actually, on a daily basis, is choked with traffic which are parked onto the road. This has in the past been a difficulty for waste collection vehicles on their collection days, some of which have had to be abandoned. They come back on another day. On occasions, we have ambulances which try and get through they're called chicanes, I think, in our common parlance, but they are nevertheless parked vehicles. And on one occasion, the fire engine almost had to abandon a house fire because they couldn't get to the place on time. So we have a massive parking problem. but there are 208 properties actually coming out onto Queen's Road. Not all of them in Queen's Road, 76 in Queen's Road actually. And of course, 203 or 205, whatever it is, residences will inevitably have the number of vehicles associated with it. And all of these trying to get out in the morning, there are only two exits from Queen's Avenue, one onto the London Road, which is the A20, and the other one onto Queen's Road, which goes north and south from the A26 to the A20. And getting out in the morning takes anything up to 20 minutes for people to get from their homes out onto the London Road. So I'm suggesting really, Chairman, that the residents there are complaining that there is absolutely no control over any of the traffic in Queen's Road, and it does need to be regulated. But it needs a professional eye to engender the regulation. They can't do it themselves. The residents will complain to each other that they are blocking the road, but nevertheless, when people get to junctions, they find they can't go out into the junction because traffic is coming both ways. So the petition actually does ask for a variety of things to be dealt with. And that can only be done by a professional officer who will possibly, hopefully, sit and to watch over a period of some hours, maybe, the actual movement of traffic in and out of Queen's Road. Amongst the things which they are being asked to do is to see whether there's any means of regulating that traffic flow by either putting in a single yellow line, probably on one side of the road to protect it, or putting in commuter ban, perhaps as another effective means of control of parking, or also, in the extremis, to see whether or not there is an argument to be made for moving one way in Queen's Avenue, either north to south or south to north. But we think the preference would be from the London Road up to Queen's Road, and any other traffic then could come back to the traffic lights, so they get a decent way out. So all I'm asking, Chairman, today is that the committee will see that this is a very constrained area that needs to be dealt with. We don't particularly want double yellow lines everywhere, but yellow line protection would be helpful. But something needs to be done professionally. So what we're asking for is a proper survey to be undertaken in Queen's Avenue that can actually then produce a report which will give possibly some suggestions of mitigation. And if that can be done, Chairman, I think that the residents will be more than satisfied. They have been trying, actually, for around about 7 or 8 years to get something done. And I have to say that successive councillors in the area have said, well, you will need to bring a petition to this body. And that is, in fact, what we are doing today. Chairman, I do move, and I do hope that we can get a professional look and a proper highway recommendation for some traffic regulation in Queen's Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Daly. Well, as I said earlier, I have 3 options, or the committee have 3 options. I'm discarding 2 of them, and I'm going for the first one, which really fits in with your phraseology of a professional eye. The option is that we refer the matter to the next meeting of the appropriate committee, where it will be included in the appropriate officer's report. So what that really means is that county officers will take your petition away with them and work on it. And I think that accords with your wishes.
On behalf of the residents, Chairman, thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman, may I speak for just a minute in support of Mr. Daly?
Well, you can support, but I think Mr. Daly has made a very, very sound presentation on behalf of the residents. Unless you're going to add anything different, I think I'm happy, and members here are happy with that. But please.
Well, Chairman, all I would like to say is that I really welcome this petition. As Mr. Daly, Councillor Daly has said, we have been trying to get something done on this. We've been repeatedly told this is low priority. And we were asked, or rather, one of the residents was asked a year back to get community support for looking at this problem. I'm very pleased that the residents have done so. Thank you.
I'm sorry, it's from Mr. Wiles. If you'd like to come up there, Mr. Wiles, and when you press the red light, we'll count the minutes.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for allowing me to present this petition. I'm speaking basically on behalf of some 200 signatures that came solely from the number 19 bus route, which is the route from Bearsted through Grove Green, a sort of a circular route. I am a layman. I know really nothing about buses or bus services, and I'm also a layman about petitions. Over the last 12 to 18 months, I would say, that the service has been quite bad, to put it mildly. There's only one service an hour. It's often very late. We're talking historically now. It often doesn't turn up at all. And I'm basically speaking on behalf of the bus users. Some of them are pensioners, some of them then therefore, if a bus doesn't turn up, are standing at the bus stop for an hour and a quarter, which isn't so bad in the summer and the spring, but in the winter it's not a very good thing. Even recently, Tuesday the 7th, there was no 9:33 and no 11 o'clock bus. That's 2 out of the 4 buses that morning. Monday the 13th, there was no 11 o'clock bus. This Friday just gone, I came back from London, got to the bus area about 3:25 for the 3:40 bus. It didn't arrive. And the next bus did arrive at 16:10, so people were there some 40, 50 minutes. I know we've got no say over schedules, timing, etc., but while we were there were 5 82 buses going to Parkwood, came and went. I know we've got no say over the schedules. Hence, we made this petition, hence 200 people signed it. It also went to the Downs Mail and the Kent Messenger. Mr. Root, who's sitting behind us, heard about it and got in touch and wanted to meet. I gave him the bus user's point of view, and he gave me a Arriva's point of view. Now, the system, as far as we know, is a deregulated system. Arriva apply for an operator's licence to the traffic commissioners. This is granted on certain conditions: reliability, punctuality, and also they're supposed to keep a customer complaints log. The traffic commissioners admit to limited powers, and they would have to rely on Arriva's log for complaints. Our experience with customer complaints from Arriva has been it's been poor, incomplete. It often doesn't respond either to phone calls, emails or letters. And so we think that needs vast improvement, because traffic commissioners rely on that in order to make any headway with Arriva. Our approaches to Kent County Council and Maidstone Borough Councils are met with go back to Arriva, but then if we can't get in touch with Arriva customer services, it's a bit of a circle. Arriva are doing a new schedule starting April, as I would imagine people will know, and we're going to get 2 buses an hour and with a slightly longer route. And we're going to be hopeful that this is going to be an improvement. And obviously we will keep an eye on what's going on. And it's most definitely Arriva's customer services need improvement. Now I've got 4 points to make, and shoot me down if I'm going past the remit of the petition. There doesn't appear to be any representation for the ordinary bus user in the current system. In other words, there's no customer feedback, which I would have thought was quite, and again, shoot me down if I'm wrong, in any business you need customer feedback to improve. There doesn't appear to be any representation for the ordinary bus user. As far as I'm aware, no surveys are done, either annually or even less, to see if the system is satisfactory for the people who are using it. In these days of the internet, I wouldn't have thought it was all that difficult to set something up where people could respond, not for minor complaints like a minute late and things like that, but in general, is the service satisfactory? It's the electorate, the constituents, the council taxpayer who actually use, and some are reliant on, the buses. Exactly what is the role of Maidstone Borough Council and Kent County Council in this process, in this system? Kent County Council issue passes for pupils, students, pensioners, etc. Is there any overview of services? For example, are secondary head teachers asked about the service provided? Are they happy that the bus arrives to bring the children to school on time and to take them home on time? Or even asking the pupils and students, are you getting a good service? Things like this, I don't know. I might stand corrected, but it doesn't appear to be existing at the moment. Finally, because I know my 5 minutes won't last long, we realise that there will be extenuating circumstances, motorway closures, roadworks, etc. But we do feel the service should not be reliably unreliable. Our point of view is the bus user. We think if Arriva apply to run a service, put up their timetables, and then they should do what it says on the tin. And there must be some sort of accountability in this, because we've found very little.
Mr. Watts, thank you very much for making your petition very, very clear. I've got 3 options for you, and you've got a bit of luck. I'm going for number 2, and number 2 says that the committee, the board, can discuss this particular matter if it relates to any other item on the agenda. So if you'll kindly go back to your seat, we will include your comments in one of the following items, because I'll introduce him in a moment, but we have Arriva here. He will answer as best he can. The 4 last points you make, not for me to interrupt, but I think there are many bus groups in and around Maidstone Borough with the parishes and users. Limited input from Maidstone Borough Council and Kent County Council on most of services. And we've also got hiding away in the corner a very senior Kent County Council officer who is a very senior manager of bus routes and everything to do with buses. And if he needs his ha'porth put in, I'll ask him at the same time, because some of the points you raise, perhaps he could cover. But thank you very much for your presentation, and I'm sure those points, or some of them, will be included in a later item on the agenda.
By the way, thank you very much for listening.
Pleasure. Agenda item 9 are questions, and we have 2 questions from members of the public on the agenda today. This session, and these are the rules, I'm reading out the rules, this session will last for up to an hour. I can assure you it won't, as per the rules of the Constitution. Both questions today have been asked of the Chairman. The first question will be asked by Councillor Bob Hinder, Chairman of Boxley Parish Council. And the second question will be asked by Angelo Martinez of the Maidstone Cycling Forum. Councillor Bob Hinder, we see you often here, Mr. Hinder, in many guises. I lose track of how many councils you've been on, but it's a credit to you that you've been on so many. Off you go.
Thank you very much, Chair. We hope you find this rather interesting proposition. Boxley Parish Council recognises that due to the financial cutbacks, its services and highway projects have to be prioritised, but it feels, certainly to this parish council and its residents, that communities are being abandoned and common sense is going out of the window. The report before the committee highlights the issues that residents are bringing to the parish council. Some of the issues are not huge money pits, but rather common sense preventative measures that, in the case, for instance, of yellow lines at Grove Green, are preventative to stop injuries to children and other road users. This has been exacerbated by the closure of the park and ride. Recognising the dire financial straits that principal councils face, Boxley Parish Council has identified a budget of up to £40,000 to be spent on a suitable highway project or projects, and is also investigating the possibility of using crowdfunding. The Parish Council wants to work with Kent County Council and Maidstone Borough Council, but currently feels that even though it is willing, as the saying goes, to put its money where its mouth is, there is no dialogue or even a sense that the principal authorities are willing to talk to parish councils who are attempting to find solutions to problems that they don't want to know about, even though they may have caused them. An example, for instance, is parking. We were requesting assistance with yellow lines on Grovewood Drive South. Parking further along Grovewood Drive South towards Weaving Street would remove any of the hazards that are being created at present on a daily basis. So basically, Chair, we're offering to work with other authorities to try and cover and clear some of the problems that we have that we've highlighted in our Boxley Parish Council highways issues. Thank you for your time.
And thank you. You have prepared a very splendid and detailed, almost a booklet, which is annexed to the agenda, and I am sure county officers will take that away and make a representation to you. It's a personal signed letter to County Councillor Paul Carter. I'll get him to sign this for you if you want afterwards as a memento. Mr. Carter, do you want to comment?
Yes. I mean, this report arises from a meeting that I had with the parish clerk some weeks ago, where I asked her, accompanied by Councillor Wendy Hinder, to set out all the issues that they would like to see resolved. Some of these have been ongoing for some time. Some of them are work in progress, and hopefully we can try and find a resolution. But our track record of KCC working with Boxley Parish Council, I think, has been a very good and positive one, and we've achieved a lot together. Some of these issues are thorny issues, not with easy solutions, but very happy, as I say, as work in progress, to work on them to try and find a sensible resolution that benefits everybody wherever possible.
Martinez, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. First of all, I would like to thank Colin Finch for the work he has done on the Medway towpath. The cyclists in Maidstone are very grateful and very, very excited about that. I am a member of Maidstone Cycle Forum and also St. Ferrian Cycling Club. So I have a chance to speak to hundreds of cyclists in Maidstone. So we all coincide that there is a section of the towpath that presents a very, very, very dangerous risk to cyclists. And it is a section that goes under the Maidstone bridges. And we have come up with some proposals, but we are very concerned how it gets narrow at some point, how there are blind spots, and how close it is to the river. And we are very concerned that at some point, two cyclists going in different directions are going to encounter in some of those dangerous points, and they would end up in the river, and hopefully not, but maybe drowning, because it's a deep section. So, yes, that is our very serious concern about that particular section of the towpath as it is at the moment. Shall I ask the question? Yes. So would the relevant authority consider the addition of protection barriers and extra lighting in this very dangerous section of the Medway towpath as it passes under the Maidstone bridges, so we do not have to lament any fatalities in the future?
You put your case and your question very well on behalf of 200 cyclists and probably more. I think this won't be too difficult for officers here present from county to look at this and at some stage come back to this board with any comments, proposals. I'm sure they will be in touch with the relevant parties. You acknowledge and thank Mr. Finch. Mr. Finch knows all about cyclists and footpaths. So you, if I may, ask Mr. Finch to take that a bit further with other departments within Kent County Council. Happy with that?
Yes.
Jolly good. Thank you for your time.
Could you turn your mic off, please, Mr. Martin?
Item 10 is the heading of county highway petitions. I'm told there are no petitions presented to Kent County Council. And then we go on to item 11. I want you all, please, to take a deep breath. I don't want any spears and arrows sharpened to be thrown. The next speaker has come very easily on an invite. There are many questions which have been put via myself and the Vice Chairman from councillors, Councillor Maggio from Langley Parish Council, there's a Maidstone Borough Councillor representing Bearsted Parish Council, we have Mr. Wiles, and there may well be others. I could speak for hours on behalf of Staplehurst Parish Council, but I'm not going to. Mr. Root, could you come up, please? And can I thank you on behalf of the board for coming today? How do you want to play it, Mr. Root? Do you want to give a small intro, or do you want members to fire questions at you? Good. Yeah, okay. Well, let's do it properly first, and then we'll see all the other hands which are going up around the chamber. The first person to contact us, and that's why we asked you here, was the Maidstone member for Bearsted. And I wonder if you'd like to lead off.
Thank you, Chair. I raised the issue of buses. I wanted it brought for discussion table. The number 19 is the service, obviously, that I'm concerned about. We've had a reliability issue on this going back years, quite a few years. The biggest gripe I have, and the one I get my ear bashed about most, is the 728, what's known as the school bus. And the reliability of this is causing huge problems at the moment. Just this year, before half term, the week before half term, 3 days out of 5, it didn't turn up. Now, on the first bus stop alone, there were 12 children. On the second bus stop, there are 8 or 10. And then it goes all the way down the Landway and then round to Grove Green. And by the time it gets to Tesco's, it's a double-decker and it's chock-a-block, so it must have 50, 60 children on it. When it fails to turn up, all the parents have to jump in their cars and go flying into Maidstone at one of the worst times, congestion-wise, and it's causing chaos. I've got one mum who's saying, I'm going to have to give up work. So in the week before half-term, 3 times out of 5, it just never showed. The first 2 days back, after half-term, it didn't turn up. And then it turned up the next 2 days, and then the third day it turned up, but it was 20 minutes late. And my own son, going back 7 years, gave up using the school bus, and he converted to the train, and I've got a lot of other parents doing that. And I just wondered how on earth we can get this service to be more reliable. It's the first stop, just down the road from my house is the first stop. And I figure if it doesn't turn up, it's 3 reasons. The driver's gone sick, the bus has gone sick, or it's stuck in a very big traffic jam. But what I'm getting told by parents is it doesn't show on the app, just nothing. So the kids have all been told, look on the app, you'll know when the bus is coming, and it's just not there. It doesn't say cancelled, running late. there's just not a clue. And it's driving people to distraction. So that's the biggest gripe. And I'm aware of all the changes and the timetable changes. And at the moment, I'm keeping an open mind because I think the increased frequency will have a benefit that may partly outweigh the longer journey. But we don't have anything between that 7:28 bus. If that doesn't turn up, there's nothing until about 9 o'clock. So for those children, if that bus doesn't turn up, that's it. They're late for school. And there's no way for residents that might wish to go into Maidstone to work to use a bus. I actually put in the system this morning. I put in to plan from Bearsted to Maidstone at 8 o'clock under the new service. Plan your route. And it told me to walk for 31 minutes to Royston Road and then get a number 8 bus that will take 8 minutes into Maidstone. So that wasn't terribly good for a commuter, I have to say, and that's what the system came up. Going back to the gentleman that raised the petition, when the bus didn't turn up after half-term, I did an online complaint. I did it on the Monday, I did it on the Tuesday. To this day, I've heard nothing. Not a dicky bird, not an acknowledgement. Now, I appreciate that's the main Arriva website and not the local one, but somehow the complaints aren't getting through. And I think that's where the frustrations are coming, because people are angry and they're complaining and they're just not hearing anything. So I just would like to put out a heartfelt plea. Of all the buses, please can we get the 7:28 to work, because it is a hugely well-used service and it's just causing chaos when it doesn't turn up. So that's how I'd like to start. Thank you.
I'm quite comfortable either way. I mean, I recognise exactly what's been said there. Quite happy to deal with one at a time, whichever suits the chair.
If I may, Mr. Root, they're going to be. My gut feeling is there's going to be similar enquiries and concerns.
Okay.
So it might be nice for you to sum up at the end, referring to each question.
That's fine.
People who want to speak, but I'm going by the script from persons who have written in prior to today's meeting. And the next one is the chairman of Langley Parish Council. Perhaps you could, whether you want to sit next to Mr. Root or whether you want to stand up. Yeah.
There we are, I'm on now. Yes, today I come representing Langley Parish Council and also the 200 residents that have signed the petition that is here that I have yet to give in, so obviously this can't be included at this meeting but will be included in future. What's been happening in Langley Heath is extremely serious for our parishioners. And it has been done without any consultation with the parish council or residents. Arriva has chosen to stop serving our bus stops in Heath Road at the centre of our community. Or the Leeds Road, I may add, and this applies to the number 12 bus. By not serving these bus stops at off-peak times, which is 99% of your service, Arriva has effectively withdrawn from Langley Village. This action will have a detrimental effect by isolating our residents, many of whom are elderly and vulnerable, and who rely on buses to service their daily lives in shopping, work, visiting relatives, friends and medical services. It will also affect school children, as one bus a day in both directions, which is what we're reduced to now, will be insufficient for their needs. I mean, as many of you know, children have after-school activities, so they will have to cross a very dangerous road. The access, I understand, is an issue in Horseshoes Lane, and that is a relevant point, but it has been such for many years. Now, I would say that it would be a lot easier to reduce the size of the bus than to widen the lane. And the lane actually includes a footpath, which is absolutely essential, that has to be away from the road, and there's a hedge dividing it. There is a very limited service provided by New Venture, which only serves those wishing to travel to Maidstone and Hollingbourne, weekdays, not weekends. And those who wish to travel in the direction of Sutton Valence, Headcorn or Tenterden, which concludes a large proportion of our residents, will no longer have a service coming from Langley Heath. Now, I did a recce on this, and I can tell you it takes a person of good mobility a 13-minute walk via Skinner's Way onto Horseshoes Lane to the A274, along a very narrow, isolated and uneven footpath. On arrival, there are no signs of a designated bus stop or a safe place to stand. There is no pavement all the way along the Sutton Road. If choosing to access the A274 via the Leeds Road, there is a 1.6-mile walk to the Warmlake Crossroads before you find a designated bus stop, which is just beyond the Plough. The Plough bus stop on one side is it would be used by our residents who live in that part of the village. Both stops are in a 40-mile-an-hour zone without any enforcement cameras. Speeds are much higher down the hill to the Horseshoes, where residents would need to cross the road or alight from the bus, with no middle island refuges or pedestrian crossings to help traverse this very busy road, where the ratio is 1 to 10 vehicles is an HGV. It is a serious risk to life, particularly to the elderly and school children, not least really the able-bodied. To be honest, I have problems crossing it myself if going to the allotments. The Horseshoes stop, there is a disused Horseshoes stop, is in the dip of a valley on a bend, making sight lines and perception of vehicular speed very difficult to gauge, as well as pedestrians having to contend with vehicles exiting the Horseshoes T-junction. Likewise, those residents using the bus stop on the Sutton Valence side of the Plough have four-way traffic at the Wentz Crossroads to deal with, along with small children, buggies, shopping bags or disability issues. We cannot stress more that this is a serious accident waiting to happen. I had to come today because I felt that if an accident happens in future, it would be on my conscience should I not do so. I have a question, and that is for Arriva, and that is to ask that you consider using smaller buses outside of the school times, the school bus times, because that would be sufficient, and that would deal with the problem going down the Horseshoes Lane. And I have another question, if I may, Chairman, for the County Council, bearing in mind that this reduction, or this cut in our service really, is going to happen from April the 2nd. When can the Parish Council expect the necessary lights, pedestrian crossings and traffic calming to be installed on the A274 Langley and at the Plough? Or will the County Council wait for somebody to be killed before they act? Thank you.
Much made that very clear. The second point is not associated necessarily with Mr. Root. But Mr. Root, you're getting a bit fidgety. You want to come in early.
If I could come in early, Mr. Chairman, to answer that specific point, because the issues with Langley, Horseshoes Lane, etc., are quite different from the general sort of issues concerning service. So that might be one to deal with now rather than later, if that's acceptable to you. The number one issue for us and the buses in Langley, specifically Horseshoes Lane, is that it has become, over the last 18 months in particular, our number one accident hotspot. We are having accident after accident after accident in Horseshoes Lane, numerous near misses, and many other occasions of problems between drivers and other vehicle drivers because of the problems caused down there with trying to get past. My understanding is that the road has become considerably busier over a period of time, and frankly, we cannot continue to sustain the number of accidents we're having in that area. And that has been the number one driver for coming out and not using those roads. Using smaller buses is an interesting point. Arriva are actually trialling smaller buses away from Maidstone. It's in the Sitting Bull area at the moment, and we may well be going down that route in Maidstone as well. But that won't happen by the 2nd of April. But the main driver in this case is purely the issues we are facing with the number of accidents that we're having, particularly down Horseshoes Lane. And that's why we've made the decision we have done.
Got several other people who want to speak. There'll be an opportunity to sum up at the end. I'm now going with members who have put their hands up here and in the order which I've seen them. The first one was Mrs. Whittle, then I come over to 2 here, now I've got 2 here, but I won't forget you. Mrs. Whittle.
Oh, sorry, thank you, Gary. The number 12 bus, starting to get complaints about the changes. The number 12 serves Tenterton, Headcorn, Cheryl just alluded to it, Tenterton, Headcorn, Sutton Valence, Langley, and gives pupils that direct service to Invicta. At the moment, the service going from Sutton Valence, children can hop on there at 7:20 and it arrives at 7:53. So if it's overrunning by a few minutes, it gives the children plenty of time to get into school. The proposal now is to move that to 7:47, which is great for teenagers who want to spend a bit more time in bed, but it will arrive at 8:26 on the timetable. Now, we know any hold-ups is likely to be a few minutes late. Let's all have a reality check. Things happen, and the buses can often be overrunning by a few minutes. That bus will arrive at 08:26, but school starts at 8:30, so there's not enough headroom for when the bus is overrunning. So if we can have so my question really is, the 07:47 that's proposed from the 3rd of April, I think that's the Monday, can that be moved a few minutes earlier to enable enough headroom between scheduled arrival time and real arrival time, enabling kids to get to school on time? Otherwise, I'm afraid you're going to be submerged in calls from the head teacher at Invicta Grammar School and Valley Park, sorry, the 2 schools, Valley Park and Invicta. The reason I'm focusing on Invicta is I've had a complaint from a parent who lives in East Sutton about that service being so late. The other thing is I'm concerned that there are currently 2 services running from Langley, the 7:22 and the 7:37, that take children direct to Invicta and Valley, but you're proposing to reduce that to 1. But that's worrying because one of those bus services operates earlier, starts at Tenterton, goes through to Sutton Valence and then to Langley. But I'm told that it's often standing room only from Langley. So there's only going to be 1 bus service, unless I've misread that, 1 bus service going from Langley to, and Cheryl is nodding there as well. We need 2 services because there's housing growth in Headcorn, more children will be going to both schools in the future, and at the moment there's already standing room from Langley, given that this bus service starts from Tenterton. So I'm concerned about that. So we need to have that bus service to continue to run. We need 2 buses to continue to run from Langley to mop up that additional demand. Otherwise, what happens if there's mechanical failure on that 1 bus service and children will be left at the bus stop, I think particularly at Langley onwards, with no other way of getting to school unless their parents hop into the car. My final question is the new service that will be running from 7:16 from Sutton Valence, which many children from East Sutton, that area, use. I can't see why that finishes at Chequers. I can't see why that can't carry on and stop at Invicta. So you could use that. The 7:16, if that stopped at Invicta, you would then have 2 services that would run from Tenterton all the way through to Invicta. So that would probably answer the question and pick up children from Langley as well. So can the 7:16 that you're proposing from the 3rd of April Can that also stop at Invicta? And can the 7:47 you're proposing to run to Invicta, can we run that a few minutes earlier to make sure that children get to school on time? Last question is... I know, Eric, I'm on a roll. Don't stop me at my last JTB. The last one is, the number 12 currently stops at Oakwood, which is great. There's 7:36 from Sutton Valence, and obviously it stops elsewhere along the route. Arrives at Oakwood at 8:15, but in the new timetable, there's no direct service that will run or stop at Oakwood. So the Oakwood campus, it's not just Oakwood Grammar School, it's St Simon's Stock, and the other schools there, they won't no longer have a direct service if you live near the Weald or in the Weald. Sorry, I'm firing a number of questions at you there on timetables. I hope I've been clear, but there is a meet at Invicta Grammar School next Monday, and Stephen Pay from KCC is kindly coming along as well, and Arriva officials, to answer some of those questions. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Councillor Chittenden, and we've all got some beefs here, but let's go for questions.
Oh, that's better. Sorry, I'm not used to this now, Chairman. We're going to be sorry, we're going to miss you, and we're going to miss your speeches. That was a long one. I live about 100 yards from where the 19 passes, and in the last 2 or 3 months I've had to use the number 19. It hasn't been particularly bad from my point of view, but I must admit I was quite pleased to hear that it's changing its route, and I think it would give an opportunity perhaps to see how it goes with only half hour between, and hopefully that some of these points can be picked up much quicker. But I have to say, Mr. Wiles, I think it was a really good, well put together presentation, and I think it had a lot of good points in that need to be listened to, perhaps by all of us who have problems with our individual buses. One point that really struck home to me, because I had it over many years, I am now a member of the Equality Bus Partnership, so I do have access to you, and we have met on a number of occasions, and we do pick these things up in the bus partnership. But outside of that, it is very, very difficult for ordinary residents to make contact with Arriva. What happens is you try to find a local contact, you get redirected to a centre. You don't always get a satisfactory answer, and even when you get redirected back to Maidstone, there's not always somebody there who can do it or take even sometimes difficult to take messages. So I think this communication business which was raised is a really difficult one that's got to be resolved by Arriva. And I think that causes more frustration for certainly people I have spoken to. I know it will increase the number of calls you get, but I'd also think it will help solve some of the problems, and also, if you like, give you real-time information of where those problems are occurring. You know some of them, you probably don't know them all, and I do think that you've got to look at how your communication with the public does work, because I've suffered, I'm sure a lot of other people have suffered as well. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. My point was really to do with, we've got a theoretical timetable, and then we've got what actually happens in the real world. And I'll pick up on your point, Jenny. With regard to coming from the south, my daughter goes to Maidstone Noakes. Maidstone Noakes is on the same side as Maidstone Girls Grammar School, but unfortunately they've got very different start times and very different end times. Now, the number 59 that goes along the A229 corridor should be able to service both of those schools. It's the subsidised bus, or the bus that KCC provides some contribution towards, and it's the one bus in the morning that will go all the way from the south, all the way up to Summerfield Hospital. The problem is, it's timetabled to get there just before 8:30, very similar to the one you mentioned, unfortunately for my daughter, and it happens to many of my residents, they all come to me and talk to me about this, you've got number 5's coming along, and if you want to take the number 59, which is the only one that will go all the way without the change in town, you've got to almost take a gamble, because by the time you've run out of number 5's, if the 59 doesn't turn up or it's late, you will get your card marked. At Maidstone, they carry their cards around. They'll get a detention if they don't have the card. And if they're late, they'll get a mark on the card. And parents have called me in tears because their children get the required number of marks for a detention, and I will talk to the headmaster and actually try to explain to them that this isn't the child's fault, it's not the parents' fault, but unfortunately it's down to the way that the timetabling is happening with Arriva. With varying degrees of success. Sometimes it falls on deaf ears, I have to say, with some of the schools. But I do think Maidstone needs to be there for 8:30. Maidstone Girls Grammar School needs to be there for 8:45. So that just doesn't work. My daughter has to take an earlier bus. She just can't risk taking that bus. So a whole school there is, you know, a whole pupils from that school just completely miss out on a service which KCC is providing funding for. It seems crazy. In the evening, Maidstone ends at 3:10, the girls' grammar at 3:30. The one bus, again, which has got a contribution from KCC that goes from Summerfield all the way to the south, leaves around 4 o'clock. Now, my daughter has to wait 50 minutes. She has to get a bus. She has to go for the bus at 7 in the morning to make sure. She can't wait till 7:30 for the 59. It just isn't practical. So she gets there. She gets out the door at 7, and she comes home at 4:30 because there's such a gap waiting for Maidstone to end, grammar to end, and then that bus so far on. I really feel that there's a poor solution there for that school site. I think there needs to be a lot more careful consideration for the two buses that go from that site across to the south, both in the morning and in the evening.
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to just talk a little bit about Downswood and the problems that Downswood and other areas along Willington Street have, which I think links in very much to the problems that Cheryl was talking about in relation to the Sutton Road and the problems that the buses face in terms of the congestion that is a feature of the southeast of Maidstone. Clearly, in terms of Downswood, which is a community sitting to one side of that, where access into town, they're looking at a situation where they've had a double whammy, and part of that has been the closure of the local health provider in terms of the doctor's surgery at Spires, and therefore their dependence on the bus services to get to the alternative surgeries. And at the very time that you're looking at that, we find now for a resident of Downswood, it can, for them to get to a surgery that is either in Grove Green or in Shepway, it's a 2-hour journey. They've got to go into town, they've got to go round all the houses and then come back out and then go vice versa on the way back. In the short term, we've found a local solution to that. And in the longer term, we're also having some discussions with a competitor of yours to see if there are alternatives that we can devise for ourselves to ensure that residents actually do get the service that they actually want. But I just wanted to maybe also ask a question, Chairman, if I could, rather cheekily, because I think a lot of this has been put down to living with the congestion that's in and around Maidstone. And one of the things that I would like the gentleman to answer is what would his views be to a Leeds Langley Relief Road and the potential opportunity to reduce congestion in that part of Maidstone by up to 25%, and what impact that would have on the services that you are able to deliver.
How big is your notepad, Mr. Root? It's pretty big there. Yeah. Mr. Cumming, you know how to drive one of those buses, Mr. Cumming.
Yeah, some years ago. Thank you, Chairman. I take up Councillor Chittenden's point about the complaints, because I was following up a complaint from somebody in Downswood about the number 8 service, and it through the customer service line, and it became quite clear to me that the operator had no idea where I was referring to, and I eventually ascertained that this operator I was talking to was in Bedford. So I think we need to do as Councillor Chittenden suggests and have a more local-based complaints system. Thank you.
I wasn't going to speak on this. There are far more important people here, but you've heard some genuine concerns. And I'm going to say this with the greatest respect to you and your board. I think you've got a major problem within Riva in your management. And I say that because I've heard that from one of your own senior officers. Over the last 5 years, the number 5 route, Hawkhurst, Staplehurst, has been very problematical. And I've attended several meetings, MP, headmasters, headmistresses, and so on, so on, so on, so on. And there have been problems, not with the timing, but with the vehicles themselves. The vehicles themselves are breaking down. And there's punch-ups in the depot, not physical punch-ups, but problems in the depot. Now, I don't know that. It would be wrong for me just to say that, but that's what I've heard. Now, if there's problems in the depot and you'll say that's now being resolved, we've got a new management team and whatever, but it covers such an expanse. And then just finally, at the Fall County Council meeting at Canty Hall last week, we received the report, a very sound report, of a select committee on bus transport in Kent. And it came up with 15 recommendations. And they will be followed up in due course, and we're all waiting for the bus bill and transport bill to go through the House. I understood it was pretty close to finishing the bill bit last week. Now, one of those recommendations made a very strong case for Kent County Council franchising bus services, if allowed, under the Act. And cross-party, there was a bit of a here for that. I'm just wondering how you see, in summary right at the end, how, if at all, that Act, when it becomes an Act, will affect your service. Now, before you come in, I've just seen a very last quick hands up. Off you go, and then I'd like Mr. Root to reply.
I hope you got them all written down, Mr. Root. I would like to start with just pointing out that buses were deregulated. To fully understand that in the 1980s, buses were deregulated. You're there to make a profit. Some sorts of services are subsidised by county, but I totally understand you're there to make a profit, and we need to work with you and other bus operators as a partner to get through Kent to get the best we can. And the bus bill does open up channels where councils and borough councils, I think, can actually look at ways of setting up services that improve the kind of mechanisms of control, etc. I think the bus bill final reading is next week, I think, that's what my research tells me. A couple of negatives. Can I just ask a question? The Coxheath to East Farley service that's being removed, the service 89, that part of it, that's very disappointing. It will leave some people in isolation. I know residents are upset about that. One, is that service, is that down to usage or with Arriva? The question is to Arriva, really, as this operator. So that's a question to ask. What is the reason for that? I do understand there's a benefit of having competition because of other operators that will run services, which is one thing about bus deregulation we must exercise. The second question is FANT services, and I did meet you last week to discuss this with you, but haven't had an answer back. Can we confirm that FANT services, which are being cut, but again, there are other operators that are hopefully keen to provide competition, but your FANT services, can we confirm that you will keep special eye on the hourly service it's gone down to now, and because of the service issues that have been pointed out to you there? The buses that are going to be split in the town, so the 85, the 86 and the 8, I think I've worked out. I spent a day travelling on buses to try and work out the effect of these. Can we just ask for confirmation that you will review these? I think your colleague has suggested that at the Quality Bus Partnership in December, a review of the effect of the split in the services, whether the reliability is improved or not, and a frank conversation will be had with elected members and interested parties. And the last question is, can you also confirm that on the 27th you're having an event, another event in the town to promote, to publicise the changes? One last item, if I can ask, I understand also that bus timetables, and I asked you this earlier, but it's good news, bus timetables will appear in the Gateway. It's not called the Gateway now. What's it? Maidstone link, that bus timetables will appear there, and it's important they get there next week, and I welcome that. That's a good thing, and I understand that you're doing that yourselves. Not with Maidstone staff time, you're actually going to keep them replenished. And I want a clear answer to the committee on that, if I can. Thanks.
Yes, Chairman, just for clarification, my understanding is that the FANT services and the East Farley services have been, or it is proposed that they will be replaced by another operator, so that's not an issue.
Right. Okay.
No. No, I need to try and make them smile, don't I? That's right. Okay, so I'm going to start by saying we've got a new management team, which the chairman, of course, thought I would start by saying, although it is actually quite true. Let me be frank from the start. I've been with Arriva just on a year now. I'm the general manager for Maidstone. My responsibility is actually for the running of the depot and the buses out of that depot. Drivers, etc., etc. Other colleagues, such as Robert Patterson, are here. They deal with the sort of the scheduling of and all of that side of things. But obviously, I'm involved in that as well. Above me in the business, there's actually not a single person left from the day when I joined the business a year ago. There's been a complete change all the way up to the regional MD, Simon Lowe, who some of you have met already, and so there has been a different emphasis in the way the business is going. I'm not going to sit here and try and defend any of the service-related issues that have occurred over the last year, and maybe more, as people have alluded to in the hearing to the meeting today. There has been all sorts of problems. And part of the role that I've got is to sort that out. And actually, whilst it's not out there at the moment, in recent weeks, and I'm talking the last 6 to 7 weeks, there has been actually a marked step up in the performance and the way we're actually dealing with our buses, through our engineering department, the buses that we're using. We've got some new buses coming in. We've got some new-ish buses coming in, cascading from the rest of the business. And actually the fleet of buses that we've got today will be quite different in as little as 4 to 6 weeks' time. And that's going to make quite a considerable difference on top of even where we are now. And so I accept about breakdowns and other reliability issues of buses. Those issues, I will say today, are going to disappear. They already have to a great extent, and we've got the reliability coming through, and we're going to continue to work on that. Outside of our own control, congestion is a huge issue. It is the biggest driver, in fact, for the network review that we're about to introduce. Probably should have happened early last year. It happened in Gillingham the end of the year before. It didn't happen here last year because we had the bridge works that were taking place and we needed to work after those, and that's just a timing issue. The reality is that today, based on our current schedules, when we send our buses out to the depot in the morning, the reality is quite a few of them are running late within quite a short period of time in the environment we're working in today. And a little sort of statistic is that We lost 26,000 miles of service in 2016 just because of congestion. Nothing else. We lost other mileage because of our own problems, but congestion was 26,000 miles. That's just the Maidstone network. That's a big issue for us. This year, so far, has been somewhat better. Whether that is because of some improvement because of the bridge works, I'm not sure at this stage, if I'm quite honest, but it has been somewhat better. But we've also had some pretty horrendous days when outside influences, accidents and so on and so forth do affect us. And it is a big problem. So how does that, therefore, lend itself to what we're trying to do to solve the problem of our service level? It was touched on earlier that we are splitting certain services. At this moment in time, and it's relevant to some of the services that have been raised here, particularly the services where there is low levels of frequency, buses go off in all directions in the morning, and they may work a multitude of routes, crossing the town backwards and forwards, and then maybe they'll drop onto the hourly 19, for example. Now, that's all very, very well, but if they're dropping onto that hourly 19 from London Road, and on London Road we have congestion, and we can't get the bus there, it doesn't get there. And that hourly service is lost. That is what has been happening. That's a single example. Probably an even better example would be the current 85, which runs through from Senacre to the hospital. It goes backwards and forwards basically all day long. You have a problem at the hospital end, as we have done recently. I'll look at my tracking, and I've got all of the buses at the hospital and not one at Senacre. So we end up with our network being affected by what else is going on in different parts of the town. So, the strategy behind the new network is that basically Maidstone Town Centre becomes a hub. We run in and out. So the 8, which currently starts on the east of the town, runs through the west of the town, doesn't. There will be the services from the east of the town into the town centre, and then from the town centre out to the west of the town. The classic example is the 85. The 85 number route will now be Senacre into the town centre. The part of that route which currently goes from the town centre to the hospital will become the new 3. Yes, it will mean a change in the town centre. Won't make any difference to the prices, but it will mean a change in the town centre. However, if in this town where you can have a situation very regularly where one part of the town is affected, the rest of the town, our routes should operate fairly normally. So if I come back to the 19, which at the moment, as I say, to all intents and purposes, because of its frequency, buses visit the route from elsewhere in the town to try and provide the service. We're able to say, right, we'll put 2 buses on that. They'll stay on there. They'll go in and out. They'll be half-hourly as a result. And part of what we're looking for from that is that we will get improved usage of that. It will be more reliable. Yes, it is a longer route because we're looking to do that to try and improve the use of the service because we need to financially, but that should work. And that is the sort of the strategy we've used for the network review. Underpinning all of that, when we get down to schedules and timetable level, which Robert would have been able to talk about in much more detail because he's the sort of the geeky side, as it were, is a hell of a lot of data. We are actually tracking all of our buses. We know where they are every 20 seconds. And that data is used by the commercial team to develop the schedules. Within our driver's working day, which we've just had to completely revamp, we have actually had to increase the amount of sort of comfort time, as it were, in the various routes quite significantly between what we're doing now and what we're going to be doing after the 2nd of April. Why? Because they can't actually achieve their current working day as we want them to on the schedules because of whatever gets in our way. So there's a lot of work gone on behind that is data-driven, the same as we have done in other areas within Arriva very successfully, and we are very optimistic, therefore, that on a bus-by-bus basis, what they are there to achieve, they will be able to achieve, dependent on what may get in their way. And we have to accept that things do get in their way. That underpins what we hope, along with the changes in the actual buses themselves, investment in the buses, will become a hell of a lot more reliable service, which I then have the responsibility of trying to improve the usage of. That's part of my role as the General Manager for Maidstone. But I'm supported in that, of course, by the board, who want to be able to ensure we are providing a better level of service than the company has done previously. That's what the commitment is to that. Now, there are issues about certain bus times, and we're having discussions with Invicta, as you know, and those sort of things are being looked at, particularly by Robert, who would be able to, as say, give you a bit more information on that. But at the same time, we are saying that what we believe we've scheduled will work to a far greater extent today than what it, in the future than what it does today. So, you know, it's not just as we discussed. There is quite a lot of confidence. But if we have to change things, we will change things. Will we get it 100% right? No, absolutely not. But the commitment is there to make sure that it does work correctly. So that's what is underpinning what we're doing. With regards to specific services, have I actually covered? Right, East Farley was purely low numbers. There was, we are, the 89 services as a whole, we are looking at improving the reliability and keeping that to a 20-minute service. There was insufficient business out of East Farley, so that is why East Farley went. Similar with Fant, but we have kept the hourly service. It is purely on the western side of the town, so we're optimistic of reliability there. Yeah, we of course are more than happy to review how our strategy of splitting routes actually will work, but we're highly confident of that. It's not new to Maidstone, not new to Arriva. It is new to Maidstone, it's not new to Arriva, and we believe it's the right way to go forward. Have I missed any particular routes? Anyone would like to jog me if I've missed them? Yes. I would. That I have to say, the 59 as a route, I know there's been issues with. With regards to the schools, that's the first I've heard of that personally. So I will have to take that one back to Robert, because I had not at any stage heard about there being any issues in relation to the school timings. So I will take that back, and I'm seeing him after this meeting, or at least speaking to him. So I will take that one back.
Generally, could you answer, there's lots of questions about customer service, and I think you will do it, Mr. Root, frankly. What can you do with your bosses above to get, I think someone phrased it as more localised customer service and response? We're going to try and back you in Maidstone as operators as much as we can. We need to hear from you guys, I think, a bit that you might put some extra effort into looking at these number of complaints in various geographical areas and lack of response.
Okay, customer service, the way that works, it may not seem like it, and I understand that from today. Actually, the actual inquiries that get through are dealt with locally. Let me explain. Yes, our customer services central base is in Luton. So it covers the whole of Arriva in the UK. Everything goes in there. They don't answer, as such, anything. When something gets in there, it comes out to the individual depot concerned, and my guys in Maidstone are dealing with the individual questions that get to them, and they deal with that. That's an area I'm confident with. I am concerned, and I will take it back to my regional MD, about the sheer amount of people who seem to think that you know, it's just going into this black hole. And I don't understand that, if I'm very honest, and that is quite a big concern. But I mean, I literally get a report on what we've done locally, everything that's come through to us as a depot, literally every morning at 9 o'clock. So there is something wrong, and I will take that back as an important point.
Right, we must move on. Mr. Root, I'm going to ask two favours. I'm going to ask the clerk to write to you tomorrow or the next day with the basis of the questions which have been put. And then I'm going to ask you now, if you would be so kind as to formally reply to those parishes and individuals. And then I'm going to ask you if you and your colleagues will come back again in 3 or 4 months' time. You make a big play, and it's a genuine one, on congestion. I can't see it getting any better, but hopefully I'm wrong. But it might be in 3 or 4 months' time, with your new buses and your new shared routes, that things will have improved, or not. And it may therefore be quite helpful for members if you came back with Mr. Patterson or whoever, and there will be perhaps some pats on the back, perhaps not. But I think it would be helpful to have this continuing dialogue on top of your promise there to get the PR and the management sorted out better with regards. So thank you for your time today. You've satisfied us in part, certainly not in whole, but let's hope there will be an improvement in the future. It has to be very quick and relevant.
Well, just two things very, very quickly, Chairman. One of the things you mentioned was the bus service that used to go from Seneca direct to the hospital. You can't get from Seneca directly to the hospital anymore. And I really would ask you to look again at that and the number 8 service. The question that I asked in relation to congestion, which you didn't answer, was what would Arriva's views be on a potential relief road?
Okay, put it in your written response, please. And the clerk will put those responses to the persons or parishes who raised them. Well, that's very kind. You've missed your bus. It didn't turn up, but have a safe journey home. Good. Right, we're now on agenda item 12. We're doing reasonably well. It's 4:20. And on this one, this is Maidstone Integrated Transport Package, which no doubt includes a multitude of sins. And Russell Borman from Kent County Council will give this report. Mr. Borman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members. I'm here this afternoon just to give an update on progress on the Maidstone Integrated Transport Package. Members may be aware that locations have been identified jointly by Kent County Council and Maidstone Borough Council as requiring measures to address the existing traffic congestion and improve journey time reliability. There were a number of locations that were identified and approved at JTB back in October 2015. Funding for the Maidstone Integrated Transport Package is funded via the Local Growth Fund, which is £8.9 million over the next 4 years, inclusive of Section 106 funding through local development. You will see from your report that you have the locations identified in 1.2, and if I may, I will run through individually to give you an overview and an update on current progress and where we are. First junction within the report is the A274 Sutton Road at the junction with Willington Street and Wallace Avenue. To give you some background, an initial layout design unfortunately was found to reach the saturation point within the first year after construction, and therefore a redesign was required, which has increased the overall approach lengths on both the north and south side, inclusive of actually widening the junction further. This is demonstrated through modelling work that once completed and constructed, it actually allows for the future growth and will see a significant improvement up to 2029. All works can be delivered within the highway boundary, and the current design does not allow for bus prioritisation. However, this could be retrofitted at a later date, and the views of the JTB on whether bus priority should be included are sought. Milestones on this particular project are as follows. The outline design has already been completed. We are now moving into the detailed design element of these works, and that is hoped to be completed by June 2017. We also, as with any major scheme or highway improvement, will undertake an element of engagement not only with local residents but with, he's gone now, but local transport operators, local businesses, local members, and that will commence as soon as following this JTB, and will be ongoing throughout the detailed design progress and process to actually get feedback from those people and alter design if required accordingly. We are looking to actually start construction of this particular scheme this financial year. Obviously, we are constrained with local growth fund timings and funding allocations, and therefore this was the felt to be the most scheme-ready project, and obviously was put to the top of the list jointly by Maidstone and Kent. And we hope to get construction starting in October, which will allow us to undertake the vegetation clearance that potentially is required, through to an April 2018 completion date. Moving on, the A20 at the London Road, or Ashford Road as I've been corrected recently, junction with Willington Street. Again, we have looked at a number of options for this particular junction, including a roundabout, which unfortunately didn't demonstrate the capacity improvements that we were seeking for this scheme delivery. The most suitable option that we've identified is to retain the existing traffic signals, but actually include a dedicated left turn lane into Willington Street and a dedicated straight ahead lane going into town by utilising the existing hatched area on the carriageway. This scheme is relatively small in comparison to the other schemes within the Maidstone Integrated Transport Package, and a preferred procurement route would be to utilise the Kent County Council term maintenance contract, and all works are again contained within the highway boundary. Again, key milestones for this particular junction. Designs have been completed. We are looking to start engagement with the local residents and stakeholders immediately, and we are looking to deliver this particular junction improvement between June and August of 2017. Moving forward into what we've classed as the A229 Lewes Road corridor, this has identified 3 or 4 of the identified junctions within 1.2, and it includes the Wheatsheaf Junction, Armstrong Road, Cripple Street and Borton Lane. Extensive feasibility works has actually been carried out on all of those junctions, and we have a number of identified proposals that could deliver improvements not only to capacity but journey time reliability. We are currently in the process of assessing each one of these for viability, obviously, and their benefits moving forward. Obviously contained within that, there are particular elements and on those junctions that identify the need to acquire third-party land if we were looking to maximise the benefits through these works. And obviously we have our KCC property have been commissioned to assess those benefits of purchasing adjacent land. Our current consultant, Amy, have carried out assessments and design work to demonstrate whether that land could benefit from the congestion and improved capacity. And further work is required to make an informed decision on proceeding with any purchase of third-party land. Again, current designs do not allow for any bus prioritisation. However, again, we would seek the JTB's thoughts on this. Key milestones for this particular piece of work. Feasibility designs, as I've said, have now been completed, and we are going through the assessment of those designs to come up with a preferred scheme jointly through Maidstone Borough and ourselves, with a completion for that by July 2017. We will then move straight into the detailed design part of the process for those preferred designs, and we hope to have that finished by March 2018. Any land acquisitions that come out of the preferred scheme options would look to start negotiations from July 17 to July 2018, with a consultation period running from July through to December 2017. Obviously, if there aren't any land acquisition requirements, then obviously these timescales may be able to be reduced, and we may see a quicker process for these particular junctions. We would then move into the procurement section of the process from March to June 2018, with a construction period likely to be 2018 to 2019 April. Obviously, as you can understand, there's a number of junctions to be looked at, which is why the construction period is so lengthy, because we're looking to get cost assurance and affordability by actually packaging those up as one project. The next location is the M20 Junction 5. Now, this includes the London Road at the junction with Hermitage Lane and also the Cold Harbour roundabout. Again, early modelling work through the feasibility stage of the design has identified that the original JTB design unfortunately did not offer a robust capacity benefit on Hermitage Lane and London Road. We've then gone back and reassessed the design, and discussions were held with an option looked at to utilise the adjacent land for a dedicated slip road leading from London Road to Hermitage Lane. It has been brought to Kent County Council's attention that the landowner may not be willing to sell the required parcel of land to accommodate this. Consideration has also been given to the proposal of a link road between Hermitage Lane and Cold Harbour roundabout, which potentially would be developer funded, that would mitigate the impact on London Road Junction, but could impact on the Cold Harbour roundabout. Therefore, we have instructed our consultant to start work on looking at designs to enlarge the circulatory at the Cold Harbour roundabout to take into account any additional traffic coming from a different direction moving forward. Junction 5 itself on the M20 is relatively straightforward, and design work has been progressing extremely well with that one. And we have had initial meetings with the Highways England to discuss the proposals, to go through their processes and procedures for approval, and obviously discuss any timing issues that they may have with their network. Again, with this one, land acquisition may be required to optimise benefits of improvements at these locations, and that is currently being assessed through the design stage. So, key milestones on this particular piece, on this particular junction. Outline design, it will be complete in April this year. We will then move into the detailed design stage and run through to the summer months of August. Tender documents we will look to produce between September and November this year, with an engagement period spanning a similar period of the detailed design and tender document stage. Utility diversions we would look to get in prior to any commencement, and a construction period running from April 19 to October 19. It's worth pointing out at this stage that additional design has been incorporated within these works to improve the new signalised junction at the retail park on Hermitage Lane. It was prudent to carry out the work at this junction at the same time, as they had an impact on each other. Therefore, a proposal to construct a dedicated right turn lane on Hermitage Lane into the retail park has been promoted to Tunbridge and Malin within the highway boundary, and a slight update on that is they have approved that recently, and we are looking to move that forward. In conjunction with that, we are actually looking to see if we can get a dedicated left turn into the retail park, travelling up Hermitage Lane towards London Road. Detailed design work is progressing as we speak, and we are looking to utilise again the Kent County Council term maintenance contract, and we are hopeful that this work can be delivered in summer 2017. Remaining with Hermitage Lane, at the other end of Hermitage Lane at its junction with St Andrews Road, again feasibility designs have been undertaken to assess the potential improvements that can be delivered at this extremely constrained junction. Obviously, it's a very residential area, and we are constrained by the adjacent properties, etc. A design has been produced that would require third-party land, and the benefits of that are being assessed currently, with the inclusion of traffic regulation orders to assist the free passage of vehicles moving towards London Road. This, in turn, will improve capacity and journey time reliability. Design work to assess the impact at Tunbridge Road at the junction with Fountain Lane is also included within this body of work, as we understand, obviously, moving people through Hermitage Lane, St Andrews Road junction quicker will only see potential for Tunbridge Road to then become an issue, and that is being progressed in conjunction with that particular piece of design. Key milestones for this junction: feasibility work will be completed this month by the end of March. A preferred scheme option, as I say, there's a scheme which does require third-party land, and obviously that needs to be discussed with the relevant people. That will happen between April and July. We will then move into an outline design stage through to January 2018. Again, as I've detailed with all of our major schemes, engagement plays a large part of our work, and that will be carried out following the outlined design. Detailed design will run in conjunction with that engagement, moving through the tender process, any utility diversions, and site clearance commencing potentially in September 2019 to October 2019, with a construction from October 2019 to March 2020. Sorry, if I can just carry on. Obviously, it is worth pointing out at this stage, any schemes that we are looking to progress, we would do so through permitted development where appropriate and possible. Obviously, if planning permission is required to deliver an improvement, the necessary timings will need to be implemented into the current milestones and programme that you see within the report.
Very kind. Thank you very much for a detailed report. 4 members to date. There may be more. And when members have asked their questions, you put to us on 2 of those subjects whether this board want to consider bus lanes. That's the question you asked. Well, I thought that had been dealt with and dusted a long time ago at this board. And I'll need confirmation on that because I don't think the question need be put. But having said that, Mr. Bird was first.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I think most members here are in the fortunate position of not living in West Maidstone because those of us who have to travel in from West Maidstone at the moment are finding it extremely difficult. My experience this morning was that I hit the queue for the Fountain traffic lights just this side of the road down to Teeston Bridge. And that, for the people stuck in that queue, was pretty grim. Hermitage Lane, I've talked about this so many times. We keep looking at the junctions at the top and the bottom. We have not looked at Hermitage Lane, Fountain Lane as a whole. We have done this at our peril. We've had a piecemeal approach which has not worked, and we have ended up with a complete and utter shambles. Not helped by the mistakes that were made, and not by people here. The mistakes that were made at the northern end by the new retail development and drive-through, where work which the developer had proposed in terms of the traffic lights did not happen before the site was opened, and Councillor Daly and myself have been chasing this for 6 months plus. I think the Cabinet member is getting a little bit fed up with the emails that he's had from us because we have been merely passing on the frustration of residents of West Maidstone. I'm very relieved that that is happening, but clearly, as Mr Borman has said, we do need the widening of the neck at the northern end of Hermitage Lane to permit better access. The work at the Fountain and the Duke of Edinburgh, we know that there is limited scope there. I keep getting told by developers that we can do a little bit more work there and put even more houses in West Maidstone. Well, that's beyond me. But the real problem, and it is a problem I'm afraid I have alerted this Transport Board to on more than one occasion, is the middle of Hermitage Lane. We have crammed in more and more junctions, and in so doing, we are compromising the performance of one junction to fit in another junction, to the extent that we are taking out filter lanes which have been working and important outside the hospital to permit the workings of a new junction. I get complaints now from bus companies that say that they can't get through. We get complaints from residents. And not only do we have problems with the building works going on now, which I alluded to earlier, nobody has convinced me that once all of this work has been done, anybody will be able to get from one end of Hermitage Lane to another in a reasonable time frame. We have asked, and Councillor Daly and I met with officers this morning and repeated this request for a full-scale capacity review of the whole of Hermitage Lane, taking into account all the mitigation measures which can reasonably be put in place. Unfortunately, we are told that we do not have the resources within Kent Highways to do this, so we have to rely upon developers and their frankly in some cases, absurd assumptions to do this work for us. I don't think we're any further ahead, and I am absolutely terrified of the impact that we will have with further developments that are going to happen in Tunbridge and Morning, again spilling out into Hermitage Lane. It's a very depressing situation and thoroughly unsatisfactory.
And Mr. Bird's no doubt quite right and passionate about the west of Maidstone. Come and have a look at the east sometime. It ain't any better. I think lots of points were made, and I do think that Mr Bird has said and made it very clear that he and Councillor Daly are in communication with you. You have given us an update on where we are at this moment in time. Mr Cook, I have next.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it was about 6 or 7 years ago when I was sitting where you're sitting now, and we first dealt with an issue of a bus lane. And I don't recall at any point in the intervening period where the JTB has at any point indicated to officers that we would support a bus lane anywhere. And I find it a bit of a Groundhog Day that here we are 7 years later, and there still seems to be some measure of thought that there needs to be a bus lane in South East Maidstone. And I would ask for clarification from the highways officers, please, Chairman, as to what the official position of the Highways Authority is in relation to any possible bus lane in South East Maidstone. Could I then just go on to the other aspects that because I'm very concerned about the proposals for the Sutton Road junction with Willington Street. When I looked at the original proposals as they were brought forward, there was a lovely some words there that said that all of the road improvements could be contained within the existing highway. And I thought to myself, well, that's all right. Well, we're not really going to widen the road at all because it's all within the existing highway. And I think most residents and members of the public would have thought likewise. And indeed, when it comes to the proposal that we have before us in terms of the current one, it says again that all the work can be contained within the existing highway. What I hadn't appreciated was that the 20-metre grass verge that separates the A274 and the Sutton Road surface road is highway. There's a hedgerow there. There's very mature trees. There's a lot of grass. There's a couple of footpaths that cuts across. But apparently, this is highway. I find that incredibly strange. And what we are talking about with this proposal is a widening of the road right the way back from where the police headquarters effectively is, right the way up to the traffic lights at Willington Street, taking out significant chunks of the grass verge between Sutton Road and Sutton Road going in that direction, and similarly then between Sutton Road and Bell Meadow going in the other direction. Now there is, Chairman, a benefit, and it's the only benefit I can think of, particularly in relation to in the other direction, because that would put paid to the gentleman who keeps parking cars in the middle of that that are for sale, because that will then become part of the actual road, and that wouldn't be a clever place to park to offer them for sale. I think that a lot of this junction improvement, frankly, sir, is putting sticking plasters and ignoring the more major problem, which is that we have too much congestion. This is intended to move the traffic more quickly through this junction. What it will do is it will move the traffic more quickly onto Willington Street, and the residents of Willington Street and the residents of Sutton Road and those areas are suffering the legacy of years of inaction in relation to what is truly needed, which is a relief road. So what you'll do is we'll speed it up here, and then it will go down to the next part, which is, and we'll have the domino effect in terms of the next pinch point, and ultimately, actually, we would do far better to put this money towards a proper solution that the residents who are most affected by this would wish to see. Could I just say, as well, I think I find it rather strange when we look at the timetable that's before us, that we have a consultation, yet the result of that consultation is nowhere on that, but we have procurement, we have start dates, where, I mean, the consultation needs to come back. There needs to be proper consideration of the views of the residents, and they're my residents, and they're also Mr. Clark's residents when you get to the other end of Wellington Street. There needs to be proper consideration of that, and nowhere do I see in the timetable any proper consideration of what that consultation may provide. Final point, Chairman. When the officer says that the removal of vegetation that potentially might be required, I find that's a little bit, come on. You're going to be taking down a number of very mature trees. You're going to take out an entire hedgerow over about 300 yards. It's not potentially required unless you're going to leave the trees there and have the cars driving around them down your widened road. I would like to move, Chairman, that the key to this needs to be the consultation, and local residents must have their say. And in terms of that say and a report based on that consultation must come back to the JTB before we agree to proceed with this scheme.
Let officers respond to that second section, but when you spoke in your initial comments about bus lanes, all sorts of officer hands went up, but it was led by Councillor Byrne, who chairs one of the committees in this authority. So the hands went up so quick. I saw one, then I saw two, and you've never put your hand up quick, but you were one of them. So there were 1, 2, 3 on the specific first point, which was made by Councillor Cook, and then I'll ask officers to come back on the second point.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to wind us back a little bit. I've not seen bus lane anywhere on these papers. What I'm reading is bus prioritation measures. And then I'd like to wind us back a little bit further to actually that October 2015 when I was sat in your chair today. And I do recollect that this board agreed to support these junction improvements. We've already said that. I don't think any of us thought that they were the panacea and the absolute solution to solve all of the problems. But you have to do some things to make some improvement, and we'd already decided that. And if my recollection is correct, at that time, we also supported bus prioritation measures, not at the detriment of the motorist, I think was the phrase that we were actually using in this chamber. So what I'd like to say is, well, let's take the first one on the papers, paragraph 2.1, whether bus prioritisation measures should be included. Views are sought. It's very leading because we're not being told what that may or may not be, and hence we're all picturing, an extra carriageway, dedicated bus going all the way down. But from what I've discovered and the useful briefing that we had last week, in this instance, what that may mean is at the time of construction of this junction improvement, we could include a loop in the road that allowed an approaching bus to signal the lights green. And if I happen to be the car behind the bus, I'm going to go through too. So it's not at the detriment to the motorist as I'm seeing it. So let's just be very focused on what we're actually talking about and not run away with the emotion of what we're fearing.
And can I just sort of try and join that in a bit? So why might we want a bus to be prioritised? Well, we've actually, I think, heard a lot of support earlier this afternoon for buses. You know, we're grumbling that they don't work. That implies to me that we do want a bus service that is fit for purpose. But in this instance, let's just say, well, we want a new bus service. We've got a fantastic improvement to the rail links from Maidstone coming soon, the fast track. We want people to be able to get to Maidstone East Station and use it. And if we've got a load of housing at the south, we might want them to be able to actually have a decent bus journey to be able to take the train. You know, it's actually a bit of planned, joined together, multimodal transport, which I don't think any of us would be against. It's not at the detriment to the motorist. And if we include this simple measure in that junction at the time of construction, I'm sure we will actually save a lot of taxpayers' money rather than use that caveat that was said, well, we could retrofit it later. You know, why dig it up twice if for, and I'm sure officers will be able to elaborate, a fairly modest additional cost to put that trigger in now, rather than dig it up and do it again later. But not a bus lane, simple prioritisation measures that this board already indicated support for if it wasn't to the detriment of the motorist.
For that information. The two officers wanted to speak. Mr. Reid was first.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Cook asked a question right at the start about the position on the bus lane, and Councillor Burton summed it up very neatly. I mean, I spent time at the local planning inquiry, as Mr. Jarman next to me will remember. There's no question of this improvement proposing any sort of bus lane on the A274. We made it absolutely clear to the local plan inspector that the Highway Authority wouldn't allow it, and we made it clear that the Joint Transportation Board reflected that. So this is simply, this report is asking for views on the sort of bus prioritisation that, again, Councillor Burton mentioned, which is whereby, as in many other junctions in Maidstone, if a bus is approaching the traffic lights, it calls a green signal, and that is neatly summarised by Councillor Burton. Councillor Cook also mentioned the issue of the funding envelope for this and the purpose of this funding. This local growth fund is specifically for this package of improvements. It was originally for Park and Ride. That subsequently fell away. We've been to the local enterprise partnership. We've been to the Kent and Medway Economic Board and changed the purpose of this package of funding. It is specifically for this group of measures, and it must be spent on those measures. If we don't spend it soon, we're going to risk losing it. What I would like to do is, at some point, Chair, is ask Mr. Borman just to answer the questions around the degree of widening on the A274 in the preliminary designs, the verge width, and the length over which the road is widened.
Yeah, I'd like to concur with what Councillor Burton said and what Mr. Reid said. Certainly in fairness to Mr. Reid and Kent County Council highway officers, they argued vociferously in this very chamber against bus prioritisation and certainly bus lanes, but against buses. However, and the inspector went into some detail on this very junction that we're talking about, Sutton Road and Willingdon Street, he asked me what was meant by bus prioritisation, and the term I used was the same as Mr. Burton, Councillor Burton, I beg your pardon, a bus loop. He didn't think that that was enough, but what Mr. Borman is proposing, and to me it makes sense in planning terms, in the everyday use of the term planning, that if you're going to improve the capacity of the junction, surely, having listened to Mr. Root and lots of angry parents, surely it makes sense to take full benefit from that capacity increase to get buses through.
Interpretation. It's not bus lanes, and I think I said bus lanes initially, and I didn't mean to say bus lanes, but what I meant to say was there's a request here to give an input on bus priorities before we finish with this subject. Now, I've got 6 other speakers, and I'm going to listen to those now in order. If people want to come back, they can come back. But I've now got Mr. Clark, and I'm hoping that these next speakers will be on relevant matters solely here and not duplicate what's been said earlier. So, Mr. Clark was first.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a couple of points. First of all, with regard to the A229 improvements 2.3, there's mention of the feasibility designs completed. Now, in the officer's introduction, he mentioned that this was undertaken by KCC and AMI, but separately on these junctions, there were studies that were undertaken by Maidstone Borough Council and Mott MacDonald. Now, as a local county councillor and a ward member, I have seen the Mott MacDonald study, but I'm curious to know whether the KCC AMI study is taking those plans or whether they have come up with something sort of innovative and new. I just want to see how that fits together, because I haven't had any sight of this feasibility design leading up to something which is listed as completed, and I know my other fellow ward members haven't also. My second point is to do with the Linton Crossroads, which it hasn't been included in this package of measures. I just wondered if the officers could give a reason behind that, given the impact on the overall network on the A229. So they're my two sort of very specific comments. My third comment really comes out of the bus priority measures, bus lane, etc. I find that we have sort of beaten up Arriva a little bit tonight, and we've said, you know, we want something end-to-end. We want you to come back and we want you to sort this thing out for Maidstone. However, in our own report, we've got some very sort of parochial schemes which mention priority views are being sought. And I feel that Arriva could almost come back to us and say, where is your overall plan for buses? It's one thing to say let's allow for bus prioritisation in these different areas, but that's fine, and that gives us the capability. But where's the actual plan for buses? Given that we're requiring modal shift as part of our integrated transport strategy, where have we sat down with Arriva and said, where are your pinch points? They may look at these and say, you guys are total fools. Do you really think that that is our pinch point on the network? This is our plan. This is where we're having trouble. And I just, that overall strategy is something that I think we need to really work on. And rather than going to members of this committee and saying, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? I think we're just getting a little bit of piecemeal information that we can't really make a decision on without seeing the big overall package that we should have.
Yeah, thank you. Just picking up your point regarding the designs for the particular A229 Lewes Road corridor. The remit to our consultant was that out-the-box thinking. You know, what can we do to improve these junctions if, you know, land were no issue, or you know, those sort of constraints weren't to be considered. So we do have a number of options that potentially, you know, people haven't thought of previously, but it's something moving forward that we will start that engagement with members now to actually show them the plans and move forward, obviously, with the most preferred option. So, yeah, apologies that they haven't come out yet, but absolutely following from this, that's when we will start our engagement with those.
Made by Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Just briefly, Emma Taylor and Robert Patterson of Arriva came and gave evidence on our behalf, on behalf of the Maidstone Borough Council, and that was not so much, well, obviously to support the integrated transport strategy, but mainly to actually deliver it. I think there's, if you don't mind me saying, I think there's a sense of frustration that Arriva and I think a number of other people on the officer side want to actually get forward and start delivering on these projects, because there is a certain window here in terms of time.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. You're all solicitors of my health, and I'm very grateful. I get very depressed when I read the dates that are attached to all these various schemes, because the way things are going at the moment, I'm getting perilously close to my centenary, as you realise. And, I mean, there's a good thing about living long, because if you've got a memory, if you still haven't suffered from dementia, you can remember what was promised 20 years ago. And I can see in here all the time, gospel of hope, forward-looking but backward acting, because we're always playing catch-up. The ones who are really in charge are the developers. They've run rings round us for 20 years, and the problem is we keep talking about sustainability, and it just isn't there until after the event. And that's the problem with us, isn't it? Whether we're county or borough, it doesn't make any difference at all. And I read some of these papers, Chairman, 2.4, London Road, Hermitage Lane, where have I heard that before? Hermitage Lane, good God, and the Cold Harbour Roundabout. It goes on and on and on. And here we're saying the original JTB design did not offer robust capacity. Well, we knew jolly well the capacity was going to be increased because we'd already given permission for another 1,350 houses. And at a place where the design of the original roundabout, Cold Harbour Roundabout, was already over capacity. So now we've got to have a slip road going down the side, taking even more greenery away to do that. And in order to do that, we've got to negotiate with another landowner who doesn't really want to give us that, and is going to extract from us, I'll guarantee, something called, what I think is probably on the side of it, you give me something and I'll give you something. And it's a ransom, isn't it? And it'll be even more houses, more cars, more traffic, more mitigation required. And this is where it goes on. And at the bottom here it says land acquisition may be required. I can tell you it will be required. So the language we use in here always is in this conditional tense, and I do wish it wasn't. And then we go on, Chairman, we go on to 2.5, which is Hermitage Lane again, with St Andrews Road. Good God, anybody remember when we were talking to Paul Lulham about St Andrews Road, when it went round and round the circles and we had to have something brought back from that to stop it happening? Well, here we are again. We're talking about the same junction, and now we're talking about the mitigation for that down the road. Feasibility studies yet to be done. Will it work? Can't it work? Or could it work relative to the Farley Bridge? And all those sorts of things. Now, in addition to all that, I find here the construction period is going through to 2020, which is why my remark about centenary. And we go down here. There have been challenges during the early stage of design process which have been mitigated where possible. Where possible. Well, if it ain't possible, what are we left with in those problems which are not mitigatable and we're going to have to live with forever? And you cannot keep on mitigating mitigation. I don't care where you are. We're not going to be able to widen the roads, lengthen the roads, do anything with the roads that are already there, unless we take out the green verges that Mr. Cook is talking about. And in Hermitage Lane, if you want to take out anything in the middle, you're going to take out all the ancient woodland. And that is where you've really got a problem, because there really will be revolution if you start doing that. So that's that. So, Chairman, I'm sorry I'm such a misery, but I do feel very strongly that we've got ourselves into this position, and here we are, keep talking round and round in circles, talk about roundabouts. We build more roundabouts verbally than anybody as I've ever noticed, and this has really got to stop. I don't know where we're going to go with it. I really don't. But all I've heard is at the moment, we're building new junctions. We can't put in place TROs beforehand. Well, we should get on with the TROs now and get on with it, because I think that is something we can do here, get TROs in position to mitigate some of the traffic movements. Where in Hermitage Lane, up the top end, where the hospital, and everybody forgets the hospital when we're talking about this, that hospital is very important. And getting to it and getting from it is very important. People getting to the clinics are very important. And they're delayed and delayed and delayed. And here we are talking about more messing about with roundabouts at the northern end again. You know, we're already talking about the problems we've got in Hermitage Lane and London Road, and we're going to be building more roundabouts, and we're going to be getting the traffic to go around a bigger circulatory system. I really am beginning to wonder whether we should have never closed Oakwood Hospital, you know, because we've got plenty of people that could go in there for a rest. Anyway, Chairman, I'm sorry, I'm such a misery. I don't know what the officer's going to say. I really don't, whether they'll ever speak to me again. But on the other hand, it's got to be faced. We are still playing catch-up. And with our Maidstone Borough planning hat on, if we give any more permissions to anybody to put any more traffic on those roads, then I think I shall have to blow a gasket. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Daly. Now I'm going to have the officer come back first.
Just in response to your comments, and thank you for those. Obviously, what we've had to do is look at the overall programme of construction for the Maidstone Integrated Transport Package, and what we found in the initial stages of actually putting one big programme together was there was an overlap of construction. So what we've been very mindful of is the fact that we don't bring Maidstone to a standstill, and we've tried to phase each delivery stage of construction in a way that each location can be constructed separately and managed on an individual basis. With regards to your comment regarding the challenges that we faced, those challenges actually refer to some of the design challenges that we faced with our current consultant. And the issue of non-delivery. So they have been mitigated, and moving forward we have a plan in place to actually move forward with all the designs that are outlined within the report.
Mr. Burton.
Tying in directly to that, I think.
Very quickly.
What I wanted to just draw out is that when we're talking about the Cold Harbour roundabout, or that end of things, and we're sitting here as a joint transportation board of Maidstone and county highways, that actually there almost needs to be a third party at the table, which is Tunbridge and Malling, because, you know, the original work that said there'd be some capacity there was designed for our housing need. We now have a possible 3,000 more houses on that boundary, which is nothing to do with Maidstone, but of course we are going to rely mightily heavily upon our good colleagues here from county, because you are the glue that joins this together, and we need to work together on this. So this isn't just a Maidstone scenario here. We've got boundary neighbours.
Thank you, Chairman. Item 2.2, the A20 Ashford Road junction with Willington Street. It says an increased dedicated left turn lane. I live about 300 yards from that junction, and there isn't a dedicated left turn lane, so it's not the question of increasing it. There isn't one to start with. The problem is, particularly at rush hours, stationary traffic going west of this junction, trying to go towards Maidstone between Willington Street and New Cut Road and heading off to Junction 7. This dedicated left turn lane, to my mind, is a short-term sticking plaster. The left turning traffic will still be held up by the Maidstone bound vehicles. And I'm yet to be convinced of the financial viability of this, and the cost of this could surely be a small contribution towards a Leeds-Langley relief road, which will reduce the congestion at this junction. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. The sentence regarding the increased dedicated left turn lane actually refers to a redesign that was carried out to ensure that the capacity improvements would demonstrate a benefit. So apologies for that. It's actually a redesign of the original design. Having said that, following a briefing last week, we have engaged again with our consultant to actually just have another double look at that particular junction to see if there are any further benefits that we can bring whilst we're working there with some additional potential land acquisition, or if there's any other improvements that we can do at the same time. So, yeah, we are looking at that.
Councillor Chittenden.
Thank you, Chairman. 3 quick points. Firstly, Mr. Jarman talked about officer frustration. I can see the point from their point of view. It's been lots of things have been going on for a long time. But of course, we've had the examination in between, where officers from both KCC and NBC have been really challenging each other. So a lot of their time has been taken up. What it's meant, of course, is in between things that I've no doubt in the last year or so have changed. And I just feel, and picking up what Mr. Jarman said, there is actually a communication gap now. And I think it is nice, would be really nice for the particular councillors who are affected, particularly we were talking about the loose road, etc., were briefed on, given an update, and that would take their frustration away as well. Because I think that there is that communication gap. I agree with Mr. Burton. We did talk about and agree which junctions we were going to look at, and that did include the 2 at Willington Street. It's just a case, I think, to working through the concerns that councillors affected there have got. Well, the one that would really affect me, I have to say, is at Hermitage Lane, and not the one we were all talking about with McDonald's. The Fountain Lane, I remember 4 years ago, came on, we were getting things for about 6 months. It disappeared off the radar for about 2 years and has now come back. I'm pleased to see it's come back, but there's a big gap in between when everybody was left sitting there. Lastly, I just want to talk about the bus prioritisation. It was 4 years, actually, we agree with this. I totally agree with Mr. Cook about the verges. We can't get rid of the verges. This is one of the main reasons I objected strongly to it. And what you've got now is not only the large trees down one side of the verge, you've got a nice avenue of trees down the other side. They're new trees, but the other verge has now got trees on it. I thought I spotted about 6-9 months ago, a way through this problem when I saw some plans, alternative plans, which didn't include cutting out the verges, although it did take a little bit for a bus lay-by, etc. And that included taking away the big aisle in the centre. It gave you what was wanted without affecting the verges. Now, if that was put into the public domain, I think it was only a possibility, then that may help the frustration and lead us to talk properly about prioritisation rather than bus lane. So if that's still around and it's a possibility, let's have it in the open, and I think there's something there. The second point that I voted against it at the time is because reports, going back 3 or 4 years, were that a bus lane would actually slow down the traffic at the Wheatsheaf. We're getting somewhere with that, and again, I think local councillors, and I'm not one of those councillors in that area now, but local councillors in that area do need an update briefing on what you finally decided what you were going to do. If you can resolve it there, and you can resolve it at Armstrong, we might have a way to bus prioritisation. So I think there's some immediate communication problems, possibilities, Chairman, that could help resolve this problem and take the conversation out from this meeting.
Well, I hope officers take on board those comments. And Mr. Chittenden thinks he saw a plan 6 months ago which didn't take so much land away. I've got you, Mr. Cook. I've got 6 others, and you're number 7. Right.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a bit rich for Mr. Burton to suggest that we're not working well together. This Joint Transport Board worked very well together about 18 months ago on the evolving local transport plan for Maidstone and the traffic modelling that was carried out by the Highways Authority, AMI, which showed that the road infrastructure in this county town of Maidstone was creaking to its limits. And what happened? Maidstone Borough Council then commissioned their own report from Mott MacDonald, which tried to disagree with everything that the Highways Authority consultants came up with. Much of the outcomes from the AMI traffic modelling was on the basis that any increased housing development would decrease in Hermitage Lane and in other parts of Maidstone, would dramatically increase traffic journey times, which is happening every day, incrementally, as more houses get completed and more houses being built. What happened to the local transport plan? Why haven't we got one? Why are we allowing developers to get away with consents that aren't contributing significant developer contributions to improve the highways infrastructure of this county? And what we're now getting is a bit of mission creep. On a few projects, when Mr Burton is right, we did agree some modest junction improvements, and I made the point we're never going to have enough money to solve the traffic problems of Maidstone, and we should put these forward through the local growth fund, through the LEP process, to try and see what we can get to try and make those junction improvements mitigate the massive impact that more and more houses that are being built out in Maidstone every day of the week can mitigate against. And as far as bus prioritisation and bus services are concerned, I would remind everybody that there are less fare-paying passengers using Arriva buses now than there were last year or 5 years ago. And why is that? Because the charges, in my view, are excessive, the service is of poor quality, and they're now talking of diminishing the number of services that they're offering in Maidstone. So don't let Maidstone Borough Council officers tell me that the public want to have marvellous modal shift and get on this super-duper bus transport system in Maidstone, because it isn't up to scratch. Arriva haven't got the money to invest in it, and it's cloud cuckoo land to suggest it in any shape or form that it's going to be the solution to get people from A to B around the area of Maidstone. So we need to work together, and we had consensus very much on what should be in a local transport plan and what developments should or shouldn't happen as a result of the traffic modelling that was produced by Amy. But every time Maidstone Borough Council gets something they don't like, they go about it in a different direction and in a different way, and always try to come up with a different answer to navigate around the imperatives that have been delivered through much of the work that the Highways Authority, i.e. Kent County Council, has delivered. So we're in a mess, and I can't see any way that we're going to get out of a mess at the moment, unless there's some serious straight-talking between Maidstone Borough Council playing it with a straight bat with Kent County Council. For David Burton to suggest that there haven't been efforts by all Kent County councillors and the officers of Kent County Council to respond to the wishes of members, to get the traffic solutions for Maidstone calibrated and put into a medium-term plan so that we can, frankly, as somebody said to me the other day, save Maidstone from Maidstone Borough Council.
Sir. That's for sure. But I want to get through the rest of the speakers on this subject, and then I'm going to ask a question which has been put to me by an officer, which relates to the bus section. I'm going to have to withdraw two of the items which are on this agenda and push them to April the 16th. April the 16th is in our diaries. 19th is in our diaries. We will be in Purdah situation by then, and these two items are certainly not matters which will be politically motivated. Those two items are A-boards and the new proposed agreement here for this board. I will continue now with the 1, 2, 3 new speakers. 1, 2, 3 speakers who have spoken before want to come back again, and then officers can come in as their wish. After Councillor Carter, I have Councillor Willis.
Willis. Can I? I'm not the boss. Can I Thank you. Could I just clarify what items you'll take? We haven't got time to fit in on the agenda. That wasn't my question, but can I just, because you said it and I didn't catch that, sorry. Thank you, Chair. Yes, please, yeah. What numbers are they? Sorry, silly.
14 April's.
Ah, okay, all right. Yes, thank you. I've got, yes, please, I'll try and be as brief as I can, but it's something I'm quite passionate about and affects the area I represent. First of all, we're asked the question, what the views of the JTB are on bus priority measures. I'm not quite sure why we've been asked this, because it's been agreed by this board, bus priority measures, not a bus lane. I think that's a compromise. We all agree, not a bus lane. Bus priority measures have been agreed by this board before, by the Maidstone ITS, which has been gone through this board and been agreed with a modified version of, and been agreed by Maidstone Sustainable Transport Committee and full council as part. Is that correct? I thought you were shaking your head. It's been agreed by Maidstone Sustainable Transport Committee and it's been through full council. So we've been asked this question. My simple answer to that is yes, I as a member I think the bus priority measures should be included because we need to do something about congestion, and one answer is modal shift. And we should need to try our best to do that. And I think across party, a lot of us agree with that, contrary to what the Leader of the Council may have just said. Second question second thing to ask a question for an officer is the Fountain Lane junction, which is 2.5. I thought there was a scheme that was agreed at planning. I'm not expecting you to know the full answer, so it might be one to come back on. But I thought the East of Hermitage Lane scheme that was agreed at planning was based on this scheme for Fountain Lane Junction, a revised scheme that did not involve St Andrews Road gyratory. So it is a revised scheme. I thought that was agreed by our planning committee and had been through some committee stage before, yet on here it's got feasibility March 2017, preferred scheme 2017 to July 2017, sorry, April to July. I thought the preferred scheme had already been agreed at some level, and I've told that vaguely, and I know you're covering a lot of areas, Mr. Borman, an outline design next year. I thought, even with the help of DHA consultants who'd put it through with the I thought the scheme had already been agreed and perhaps needs some more detail, but I'm disappointed that it takes a year for us to even start thinking about building it. I've got two other questions, but Chair, shall I hold them?
The scheme presumably has not been agreed.
What is being referred to in this particular report is an enhanced scheme on any previous scheme that has been identified for that area. Obviously, again, what we're looking to do is that out-the-box thinking to future-proof any junction moving forward. So the work that we've actually done is a bigger enhancement than that was previously identified, and obviously following this we can start sharing those with you. But it's to maximise the capacity at this stage, and it was right to investigate all options through the feasibility and not just one that had already been looked at. So yes, they were asked to assess the existing conditions, moving forward with any proposals that have been put forward, and then obviously look at any future work that could actually improve on that particular design. So that's why we kind of find ourselves in still feasibility, if you like, but it's moving and enhancing on an existing.
Okay. That's perhaps the one for another day. The third thing is I've had communication with a hospital today, and in between these two schemes is the Bovis development, which the council had an awful lot of problems with because Bovis had moved forward and built things before full detailed planning consent was given. The council has taken, most of our council has taken action to put Bovis right, which means Bovis have rushed through planning, rushed through a road 278, I think, rushed through schemes to build the traffic lights, and this is right outside the hospital, literally outside the hospital. I've had communication with the hospital today. I know our local members have been speaking to your officers today, but I think it's important we bring it up in this forum. There is an area there where one road, two lanes, is going to one lane right outside the hospital, which affects access for residents, but most importantly the hospital, the maintenance access at the back. Is there anyone from KCC that could confirm here that that is being looked at further? I can tell you, I was told verbally by an officer at the hospital, a member of staff at the hospital, that who's called Joe, I can't remember her surname, that she had a conversation with Barbara Cooper last week about it. Are any of the I've had conversations with Brendan about this, about a site visit, and I appreciate the offer. The members probably would do as well.
Yeah, the junction arrangement was put forward as part of the planning application, so it was carefully checked and reviewed at that stage. The Highway Authority, as is normal, provided comments on the suitability of that junction arrangement. Those comments were fed into the decision-making process on the application, so I think it's important to be clear about that. The layout you're referring to is the configuration involving the development access road and Tarragon Road. Now, that has been configured in the way it has simply in order to maximise the amount of traffic that can get through the junction. And that is necessary in order not only to achieve safe and suitable access to the development, but also to ensure that the impact of that development on that corridor is effectively mitigated. So that's the rationale for those works.
And I'll hold my hands up and apologise. I'm the local member for that area. I look an awful lot at the many planning applications we've had on Hermitage Lane. I probably have not habitually looked at 278 agreements, I think, and I've learned to now. I think we really need to. But that agreement, what we see there is a filter lane that goes off left to the back of the hospital, a shopping precinct, and Tarragon Road, 400 houses. Favour is being given to the new development west of Hermitage Lane, the Bovis development, that's been extremely difficult to deal with because of Bovis being rushing ahead. I won't say anything, rushing ahead to build it. The existing residents are being penalised, frankly, for being there in favour of the newer residents for a filter lane the other side. What I would ask in public in this meeting is I've asked Brendan if we can meet him. I think our county guys have asked the same. It's their patch. Whether we can meet to look at the issue on the site. But a hospital have contacted, and I understand with Barbara Cooper, to say that they're really concerned about getting access to the hospital that way. Can I just ask a question? Basically, will KCC look, bear in mind the seriousness of the Hermitage Lane issues, will KCC look at whether something clever can be done? Funding, obviously, is a question to actually try and reinstate that filter lane, because at the moment it's going to cause further tailbacks on the left-hand side and detrimental effect on the hospital, which I think is the bit that should be ringing alarm bells to people here, and residents in access. And that question goes to whoever from KCC could answer that for us.
Well, we are comfortable with the works that are currently being implemented, but we're always open to having discussions that offer us possibilities to improve conditions along what is an important corridor.
Okay, and we're hopefully going to meet next week and look at that. Sorry, and the last question I've got is via the chair. I'm aware that the leader of Maidstone Borough Council has expressed extreme concerns about the blue light issues in Hermitage Lane. It's not a blame game because there's development and there's road issues. She's expressed extreme concern about the blue light issues, and we're looking innovatively to try and find an answer to that. Via the chair, can I ask a question to the leader of Kent County Council, what he feels about the issues in Hermitage, the congestion and the problems in Hermitage Lane, and what we can do positively, working together, to improve them?
Wish to respond. I think you've given your response earlier, Mr. Carter, very clearly. These are not matters for Mr. Carter at a Maidstone Joint Transport Board, which has no powers. It is an advisory board. We make no decisions here. And that, I think, is a matter for Maidstone Borough councillors, whether it be leader, to talk to county councillors and leader. With the greatest respect, Mr. Willett, that's not a specific point raised to these schemes. You've made very good points with regards to Hermitage Lane as a whole, and with some responses. And I'd really like to move on now, unless you have any other questions.
I think this is a joint transport board. We work together. It's not a politically motivated aggressive question. It's just a question. I would like to know the leader of Kent County Council is aware of the problems, and if he has any thoughts on how we can work together to sort them out, frankly, and however he feels.
Ask the leader of the council, Kent County Council, to reply to you appropriately. But I think he deals as best he can, and with the leader of your authority on matters generally. Right, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's really a very simple request. Obviously, it was something that was raised by Councillor Cook in respect of the consultations, possibly to the junction modifications that we've got around at the borough about shifting traffic through these junctions better. I would like a request, if the consultations do go forward, about the impact of the environmental and the health aspects in respect to removing the vegetation and the trees, because obviously this is our residents' green lungs that we've got out there, and by the removal of trees and widening roads and putting it through traffic on there, we are actually creating a problem where we haven't got probably the dispersibility of the fumes that are generated. That's my request.
I mean, I'll leave officers to answer that, but I mean, every planning application is a public document. Every member of Maidstone has an opportunity to make comment via their parish council as individuals. If you're now saying, and I'm not being disrespectful to you, that when you do these traffic schemes, what is the form of consultation, and are the verges, is air pollution and everything taken into your consultations? Now, who's going to answer?
Yeah, just to obviously pick up on your question. Obviously, we do undertake engagement. We undertake that throughout the process, and we involved we will involve all the local residents, businesses, etc. With specific respect to the environmental impact, absolutely, we have environmental surveys done prior to that piece of work. Obviously, that will include any pollution aspects of that, and that will be fed back to any residents' communication that we do have. So yes, we are aware of that. We do understand that this will have an impact, and we will push all the information that we have to them so they can make an informed decision.
I'm now going to go back to members who wanted just to have another say, having already had a say, but this needs to be relevant to subjects discussed before, rather than bringing up any new items. And firstly, I've got one there, I've got one there, I've got another one there, and it started with Mr. Cook. Mr. Cook, you wanted to come back again.
Thank you, Chairman. I expressed concern with the junction improvement in 274. The integrated package of junction improvements that we looked at collectively from both sides of the Kent County Council, so a group of us sat down with the officers. And what we're looking at this evening is a very, very different proposal to the proposal that was originally presented to members. Considerably different. There was minor impact on the verges originally. What we're looking at now is major impact. Most of the hedgerow and most of the trees between Sutton Road and Sutton Road, to put it mildly, will need to come out. Most of the trees on the other side of the road will need to come out. And there is significant road widening over a very long period. The road widening will start at almost opposite Sutton Heights and run from there approximately almost to the full length to where the police headquarters is. Now, on both sides of that road, we are taking out hedgerow and trees. That is moving the highway significantly closer to residents and houses. It is taking the noise and the pollution closer to residents and houses. It is moving the traffic more rapidly onto Willington Street at one end, and we've heard from local members for Bearsted that at the other end it's not going to have very much impact at all. That means that there's going to be even greater congestion. What I would like to see happen, Chairman, and if I may, I'd like to move this, because it is different to what's on the order papers. I would like to see a proper consultation take place with local residents, and the results of that consultation be reported back to the JTB before a final decision on this particular junction is taken.
Do you have a seconder?
Can I move that, please?
Do you have a seconder?
Yes, I do.
Seconder. Councillor Stockwell has seconded. Before we go to a vote, is it possible to do that? One, will it delay coming back to a new board, not the 19th? And will it interfere with the monies which have already been allocated? Officer first.
Obviously, we will engage with local residents, absolutely 100%, and that is part of the programme. Obviously, we will take their views into consideration moving the scheme forward through detailed design. Your question being, would there be a delay if we have to come back to JTB? Ultimately, there will be a delay in delivery of the scheme, and there's the potential for the local growth fund allocation not being spent in the financial year that it has been earmarked. So, in essence, yes, there is, but I'd like to just make everyone aware that engagement will always be carried out, and those views will be sought from the affected residents.
And liaise back to the county member. Mr. Burton, finally, and then we'll put our hands up, or we'll sit on our hands, or whatever.
This may sound like an amendment to the motion as it is now put. I don't think that we should look at this paper as a number of discrete decisions. I think we should look at this paper tonight as a single entity. And I think what we should be saying is that we note the progress as reported. We look forward to the continued evolution and consultation in relation to the schemes. And that we continue to support the bus prioritisation measures as previously agreed by this board. That would, I believe, cover what Councillor Cook is asking to highlight on one scheme in particular, but I'm sure if we went round the room, every interested party is going to say, oh, and I want to say that about mine. So what I'm trying to say is we're noting the progress on the ITS package. We acknowledge that there will be further development and consultation at every stage, and directly in answer to the question asked on the paper, we continue to support the bus prioritisation measures as we have previously resolved.
Well, that's your viewpoint. Mr. Cook and his seconder have to agree to that or not agree to it, because there's been a point put. Officers have said that there is consultation, there is involvement, the local member will be advised again. Now, the local member on this particular one item, I agree with you fully on all of these. I was hoping there'd be debate and it would go to the next stage. But on this particular one, there is a motion which has been seconded for a specific comeback here after the consultation process.
Chairman, just by way of clarification, no, I would not accept that. I think that the degree of variation to the original scheme is such that local residents have a right to not only have their voice heard, but to see that brought back here and looked at, and so we can see how their views have moderated the scheme in any shape or form. And I want to see some protection given to the verges, as has been said from.
Mr. Chairman, I fully respect the mover's right to maintain his position. I've suggested that as an amendment, and I would seek a seconder to the amendment to see whether.
Chairman, point of order. Point of order. What is being suggested here is effectively as on the order paper. Therefore, basically, to move this as an amendment to what I've moved is actually just trying to take us back to what we had in the first place. That does not constitute an amendment.
You heard what the proposal was. There has been a seconder. It's to do with consultation. It's to do with the additional land take, which was not shown or made clear previously. So we are voting that that matter goes out to full consultation. The result of the consultation comes back here and is considered and decided upon again. That's what's up for grabs. All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, I'm counting. 1, 2. Oh, you're counting. That's even better then. Yeah. Sorry?
Mr. Chairman, so you've ruled that the amendment was not an acceptable amendment?
I've ruled that that amendment has been, and I'm not saying that there's another amendment which you can put. I'm not agreeing with Mr. Cook that yours isn't acceptable. You've got a seconder for yours, and there are two.
As an amendment to the motion as put to the room.
So there's a motion on the table.
Yep.
And
Right, so the purpose of this is to amend Councillor Cook's motion so that it wraps up the entire paper in one go. So I'm seeking to amend the motion that to include the words that we note the progress per the report. We look forward to seeing the further development of the schemes and the subsequent consultation that will be necessary. And that we continue to support the bus prioritisation measures as previously resolved by this board. So I believe it's... So to be clear, Mr. Chairman, I do not believe that my amendment in any way defeats the motion. It simply enhances it.
Sorry, if Mr. Burton split his proposal to take out bus prioritisation, because I don't think we've got enough information on that at this stage, I could vote for Mr. Burton's amendment if it didn't include that in at this time.
Chairman, on that basis, I would accept that as long as it is absolutely clear that the consultations that are referred to in here will come back to the JTB for further consideration before we actually finalise the thing.
So for the sake of expediency, I'm willing to modify my amendment to not include the words relating to the bus prioritisation measures, and then I will seek a further motion concerning that, Chairman.
So I think at the moment my advice is to take the vote on Councillor Cook's item, because according to the procedure rules, the amendment needs to either leave out words or insert or add other words to it. And at the moment, what you're giving to me is a complete change on what's been put on the table. So I think we need to take the vote on Councillor Cook's item first, and then motion first, and then if that's defeated, then we can. Or you could add an extra motion after that if you'd like to add something else into it.
So, to cut to the chase, I think Councillor Cook was indicating that the main meaning of my amendment he was acceptable of once we remove the bus prioritisation words.
Chairman, and I think this deals with the officer's point, I am prepared to accept Councillor Burton's, subject to the removal of the reference to the bus prioritisation, which is his agreed, and confirmation from the officers that the consultations referenced in the paper will be coming back to the JTB.
The deletion of words from Councillor Burton. You'd now like to refresh us all. Can you, officers, confirm that results of consultation will go back to Mr. Cook?
Yes, I can confirm that any results following the engagement with residents and local stakeholders will go back, and we will work with Mr. Cook and bring it back to the JTB.
Happy with that? Right, very quickly, and we can all put our hands up. We're not going to bed yet, but we can put our hands up. Are we happy with...
We can just agree if everyone's agreed.
Agreed? Agreed. Excellent. We've got two more items to... you want to speak again?
Well, I did say that there would be a further motion because we are asked specifically in this report about the bus prioritisation measures. So what I am wishing to move is that this board continues to support the bus prioritisation measures as per our previous resolution.
Councillor Carter.
Qualify our support for bus prioritisation in the fact that it won't be to the detriment of commercial travellers and private motorists, and we ought to have an evaluation done before it's implemented and make sure it's not going to. Because in London, all the bus prioritisation has been a nightmare for commercial travellers trying to go from A to B in London with a massively subsidised public transport system that does at least deliver. We're in danger here of agreeing something without the evidence to support that it won't be to the detriment. And it was always agreed that if bus prioritisation was to take place, it must not be to the detriment of the private motorist and the commercial travellers and the commercial vehicles. So if there's evidence to sustain that, then I think nobody in this room would be against it. But at the moment, there's scant evidence to suggest that bus prioritisation won't be to the detriment of those users.
Chairman, to be clear, the reason I said our previous resolution is it was exactly those words that we used, not to the detriment of the motorist, as Councillor Carter is reiterating there.
My point is, if we're going to support any move to bus prioritisation on any of the schemes you've suggested tonight, where is the evidence that it won't be to the detriment? That's what I'd like to see before we actually spend a load of money on something that may well be to the detriment, and we're rue the day we agreed it.
Sorry, but we've got an ITS that's gone through this committee that talks about bus prioritisation measures. Full stop. And we've agreed that at all levels. Did you not come to it? We made some compromises at Mr. Cook's bequest last year. Can I ask the officer?
Yeah, no, that's not the case. What the inspector has said following the local plan inquiry is that we've got to review transport and come up with a strategy in time for 2021. So there is no commonly agreed strategy between the two sets of members on this board for the Maidstone local plan.
Sorry, as I've said before, so I'll try and keep it short. As I said earlier, the inspector supports, to cut to the chase, bus prioritisation, because he's concerned about congestion levels in Maidstone, and as you said yourself, Councillor Willis, it's one approach. It can be a blended approach with other things as well, like new bits of road, electric cars, etc., etc. But he has supported bus prioritisation.
But that's the inspector talking. That's not local government talking. That's an inspector's comment, and it may one day be a recommendation, because the inspector's report has not yet been finally published. Now, we're on Mr. Carter agreeing in part with Mr. Burton, but there's one little segment missing: evidence and proof. We all agree that in the past it was agreed that bus prioritisation would be put into practice, subject to it being, what was the word?
Not to the detriment of the motorist.
Correct. Okay. Subject to it being. But is it beyond the wit of man to get a report from somebody to say, here's the evidence base?
Chairman, if I may, I think we're making this incredibly difficult when it need not be. It particularly relates to 2.1. We've heard earlier that the bus prioritisation measure would be a device in the road, cheap to install at time of construction, horrendous afterwards, that would actually allow the light to turn green when the bus approaches. Now, me as a motorist, if there's a bus in front of me that goes through first, I'm not feeling detrimented. So we actually have to make a value judgment about that tonight. Otherwise, this scheme, with this funding, which will expire if we don't get on and do it, cannot go ahead. So I am saying to you, I don't think to let the bus go first on a green light is detrimental to my experience as a motorist.
Well, what about this? With regards to the 2 points on the bus priority, could not I ask you all whether you want officers to include traffic light bus priority in design? Now, that doesn't put tablets of stone on anything. It doesn't talk about bus lanes. It talks about bus priority for county highway officers to include, doesn't say we're going to have them, to include bus priority in designs. Lee.
There's bus priority and bus priority. The thing that's concerning Gary Cook as the local member, I think, is the take of the verges and this, that and the other, that allow not just bus priority at the traffic lights, but a take of the trees and the hedges and the green open space to facilitate an additional lane for buses to nip round the side of cars, if I'm right.
So when we bring the report back that we've agreed on to the JTB, we'll have full details of the amount of verge that's left, the amount of verge that's taken, the replanting scheme, the compensation for any compensation for residents, the impact of the bus priority we've spoken about, the green light for buses on traffic, so that you can make that, you can consider all of that.
Chairman, I just wanted to make a point. In the papers, I think there's something in these papers that has made our life difficult tonight, in actual fact, because asking our opinion on bus priority measures is such a loaded term. It's almost like saying, can members please give me a blank cheque and sign at the bottom and just leave it with us? And I feel that this has caused us a lot of a lot of challenges tonight, and perhaps that shouldn't have been the case. Perhaps we should be very, very specific, and maybe even at the beginning of this meeting say, you know, it's not specific enough. Do members really feel comfortable with that loaded term at the end there that could almost be a Trojan horse in some way to some person's particular area?
And I think what we've just discussed in the very, very recent past knocks out those two bracketed requests, and we now bring in future design statements, including all the other bits and bobs. So, but I think if we've now agreed that members have agreed that officers are to include traffic light bus priority in their designs, subject to the other items which have just been mentioned by highway officers. And I think we're not far away from agreeing to that. Is that agreed? Agreed? Thank you. Members, we've there's three other items. I want to jump and tiddly with this just a wee bit. There's agenda items 15 and 16, and I need your input here, Mr. Jarman. References from the Planning Committee of Maidstone Borough Council. Now, in my life on this board, we've never had that before. I've checked with other boards around the county. They've never had that put to them before. I can't see the purpose. Give us some help.
Thank you, Chairman. My understanding is that obviously the Planning Committee can only deal with, unsurprisingly, planning issues. And clearly these are highway issues. As I understand it, with both of these applications, members of the public objected on various points. Some of them relate to highway safety issues. Obviously, highway issues aren't within their direct jurisdiction, hence the reference to your good selves. That's the best I can do, Chairman.
What's your sound advice? Well, I'm going to get rid of the second one. I've been advised that we can't discuss the second one because of a notice sent by Kent County Council to Maidstone Borough Council. So I'm advised we can't discuss that one in any event. You were going to get round the problem of
I
the
was
first
just going to say, I think what you've said's right, and maybe that we should ask the county member for these areas to liaise with internally to see what measures could be, and they could bring it as a highway, a member's grant recommendation. So pass it back to the county member.
Riddle.
I feel quite irked reading this. Decisions have been made by the Planning Committee at MBC, and then it's been passed back to the County Councillor to come up with a package of measures to mitigate decisions passed by the Planning Committee. Now, the Planning Committee and Maidstone Borough Council, as the Planning Authority, seek advice from the Highways Authority about planning highways impact. But if they're bouncing it back, what this really means is that the county member will be asked to contribute funding from their member grants to mitigate some of the impact of the developments. Now, to me, that's unacceptable. If the Planning Committee has a concern about the highways impact of an individual application, then they should ask the developer or the applicants to put forward the funding, not the county member. The county member has a pot of £20,000 for Maidstone Rural East that has to cover 15 parishes. So quite frankly, I think this should be thrown out, and I find it unacceptable that the county member has been asked to fund or mitigate the highways impact. I'm sorry, Chairman, but this really hurt me when I saw it, and I hope this sort of thing doesn't come back for the county member to fund. It should be dealt with at the Planning Committee at that stage before it's approved or thrown out.
You don't need to apologise. I felt exactly the same when I saw this. Astounding.
Yeah, if that's the view, that's the view. But I would point out that these matters aren't directly related to the actual planning applications. As I understand it, one of them was in relation to car parking, and dare I say there was already an issue with car parking in the first place.
Well, I don't really think we should be taking this any further, because we're setting a very nasty precedent here that I'm not talking about Maidstone Borough Council, Chiswick Borough Council are going to come back with decisions left, right and centre to this board. That's not our job. Can we return that and not accept it, gentlemen and ladies? Agreed. One, which is the bridges gyratory. I go to that, and I need to include that because that was raised by a member of this board, and it's headed before and after statistics. And Mr. Wright is going to give a response to the councillor who raised this.
Thank you, Chairman. The new northbound lanes on the A229 for traffic travelling from Bishop's Way towards the M20 via Fairmeadow were opened in December 2016. As is normally the case with major road schemes, the County Council is continuing to closely monitor conditions whilst road users adjust to the new arrangements. Within the last couple of weeks, we have implemented alterations to lane markings and signage on the northbound Mill Street Bishop's Way approach in order to improve lane discipline and reduce queuing delays in this area. The traffic signal timings will be modified as conditions normalise. A validation of the Scoot control system will be undertaken at the earliest opportunity in order to fully optimise the signal operation. This requires a 1-week period of typical traffic flow conditions, so cannot coincide with planned lane closures or the Easter school holidays. Our ongoing monitoring of the scheme will include a comparison of before and after road user statistics. Observations from our control centre have indicated that the scheme is already having an overall positive effect on traffic flow conditions on this part of the network. The post-implementation surveys are currently programmed for spring 2018, as this represents the end of the defects period. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. I brought this to the committee really because I think there are winners and losers, or there have been up to this point. I certainly think there's been a big improvement if you try to get onto the gyratory from St Peter's Street, but several of my residents that use the David Lloyd Centre have said that there have been significant increases in the time in the morning rush hour, and that was the reason. I was just curious to know where we were with it, and it's interesting to hear that we are going to have this review and on the timing. So it'd be interesting. Perhaps we can have another review once that week's timing is taken.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just say I welcome the fact that new signage has been put in place, because I think this has been a major defect with the scheme up to now. I've experienced people regularly getting into the wrong lane in Bishop's Way and then trying to cut across other people. It's been an absolute nightmare. The other problem we have, of course, is people turning off St Peter's Bridge and trying to go southbound up the northbound lane, which is not a good thing, and I hope that we can eliminate that.
I don't want to sound like a complete bus person, but I have to say the bus operators have actually, both of them, at the QBP, one of them been reasonably complimentary about the results so far. Not massively, but about the drugs. And I'd say that to Mr. Borman, in that so far a very good job has been done. He's worked very hard and been very responsive when we contacted him, so I thank him for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. I've missed my train now, so I'll take as long as I like, if you don't mind. So firstly, it's just an update really on the River Medway towpath scheme. I was invited back from the October 2015 JTB to give you a progress report on how things were going. Contracts were commenced and construction started on the 26th of September, week commencing 26th of September 2016. And we're still on course really to finish the majority of the works by March 31st. Some works in Aylesford will continue until around the end of April. So what I thought I'd do really was just give you a whistle-stop tour of a photo show of where things are, or were in January. So this is when I was originally going to give this report. So just as an update for you, this is the scheme area, so from Aylesford to Barming South Street. The route follows, for the majority of its course, the River Medway. Barming South Street works are now, the base course tarmac is now down. You can see there the sub-base and the timber edgings. So that base course now is now down in that section. It's another section of it that's been significantly widened from as it was. This is the area around the Museum of Kent Life. Two sections here. There's a segregated cycle bit through this section. This is the cyclable bit, which has a resin-bound finish on top of the base tarmac and a buff finish, as was proposed for a number of areas. Aylesford Works, this is as previous to construction. There is now a bridge there. The bridge went in last Wednesday, thankfully, and all successfully installed. There on the left-hand side is the river wall, which has failed, and culvert failed. It's not producing any tidal lag at all. So the water, as the water rises, it's going straight up behind that. And of course, it was impassable to pedestrians at the public footpath that's there currently. So what we've done in this area is created an embankment to the rear of the existing path, avoiding the tree line, and that sits slightly higher than the average flooding. It will flood at times, but it's built to allow water to pass underneath it. There's a drainage blanket underneath it. The course continues south side, Unicum's Lane. This is as it was, again, sort of January again. There's now basically, I think there's a wearing course on this now as well, and that will be black tarmac. There was originally plans for 8 areas of riverbank restoration with Gabions walls. We've increased that to 14, having found a number of other areas that could benefit from it. So this is one of the larger ones nearer towards East Farley. There it is again. All notices and information has been put up. Unfortunately, we have suffered a lot of removal of these signs and at various times, so we're doing our best efforts to keep those notices up at all times and keep the public aware of when not sections are closed and open. And lastly, the cycle parking, as proposed in the designs taken to Maidstone committees, the option there with Maidstone written on it and the river is being put in the cycle parking structures that will be installed along the route. Just a quick word on trees, because I know they've been discussed at length today. So, to my knowledge, we've removed around about 17 trees. We've planted about 114. Thank you.
Mr. Finch, as ever, well done to you, well done to all your workers and your team. Let's hope it will bring great
Very quickly, Chairman. Looking at the photos, it looks absolutely wonderful. I just wondered, have you got any money left over, and could we have a few benches? Is that even a possibility?
Benches are included in the final scheme, yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. 2 or 3 things. Firstly, the comments I've had so far are very complimentary, although I'm going to the local community association meeting tomorrow, and I'll see if that's still the case. The 3 points are, one of the photos showed where you're taking a path and going down to the river, the bank is completely devoid of vegetation. Are you going to do something about that? Planting appropriate vegetation or something? There's quite a bit. That's one question. If I give you the 3. The second one, part of the problem you were having was people who were berthing their boats and were taking the path illegally and adding it to their own territory. Has that been overcome now? And the third thing, what is the current position with the length of the riverbank adjacent to the main town centre that was subject to discussion? I think possibly we're planning with Maidstone as well. 3 questions. Thank you.
Okay, yes, certainly. Firstly, planting. Yeah, the gabion walls have got coir rolls attached to them, so they'll be planted and seeded, so they're with grasses. Yeah, and they have topsoil layer on top of the gabions as well, so you won't actually see them from the top. And I mentioned the trees that we've been planting as well, so yeah. Secondly, the Unicum's Lane section, the the houseboats that have appeared there. Illegal's probably a bit harsh. I think they have approached the Environment Agency and Maidstone Borough Council Planning Authority to see if they are within their rights, and it would appear that that is the case. Whilst we have had issues there, I'm hopeful that they're now resolved, and we have retained the width that we originally desired through there. We do have a footpath through there, yeah. The last point you made is the town centre, which we went down to have a look at, and thankfully Russell's been helping me with that section. I believe their works will be done around June, I think. Is that right? Yeah, it's nodding, so I think that's right. We're also doing the environmental section as part of the towpath scheme, so not as part of the gyratory scheme, which is removing some of the flags from that eastern bit beyond the ramp. So that section towards the high-level bridge will not be accessible by the public anymore, so that bit will be fenced off. But of course, you'll be able to continue up the ramp and down the ramp.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Finch. It's a good job and well done. As you know, there is concern about the land, the bank between Unicum's Lane and the town, which some of it is privately owned and is used by motorised vehicles. Whatever we can do to protect cyclists and pedestrians from motorised vehicles, I think we should look at. I know that is difficult. Second point, Unicum's Lane itself, again privately owned, but if we want cyclists to use this towpath and then cycle up Unicum's Lane into the heart of Fant, can we do something with the landowner to fill some of the potholes, which is the most uncycle-friendly lane you could possibly imagine?
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Finch. Very, very quickly, just signage. Is the signage going up? When's it all going to be up? And is it all ready to go?
I'm in the process of making the cycle tracks orders, which will allow me to put those cycle signs up at the moment. So those councillors that have wards affected are being consulted at this present time. Once that process has gone through, I'll be then enabled to put the signs up.
As before, let David and I know. And can I just thank our lady officer who's been sitting there so patiently, who was going to co-present one or two, but her paper is the last one, which is always for noting on highway schemes. If you have any points to make on those, can you go to Sue directly, bearing in mind the time we've taken to get this far. So thank you for your attendance, Sue. Thank you all. We knew it was going to be a long one. It wasn't a bad one. We've got some results, we've got some hiccups, but that's what the MJTB is all about. And see most of you on the 19th of April. And thank you to
Chairman, item 20. Item 20 hasn't been deferred to the next meeting. If you're intending to do that, that's fine, but we have not dealt with item 20.
Oh, Yeah, you're right. I'm going to...
19. Could we just defer everything to the next meeting,
Yeah.
providing Purdo doesn't apply?
Yeah. I think we're going to have to defer that one as well, Mr Cook.
Anything else from that?
Chairman, that's fine, but we just hadn't dealt with it and it needed
You're
to be dealt
absolutely
with.
right. I've got it ticked, but I didn't include it in the 3. You're very kind. Thank you.
And 19.
19.
19 as well.
19. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. Good. Thank you, members and officers. Good. Well done, Sam. It's always going to be tight, but we got there.
It was, yeah.